Hey guys, tonight we're going deep, like bone-numbing, frostbite-threatening breath visible in the air, deep into the wintry world of medieval hunting. You ever think about how someone wearing nothing but scratchy wool, with zero Gore-Tex or heated gloves, somehow managed to sleep outside in the dead of winter, and not freeze into a tragic cautionary tale for future generations? Yeah, same, that's what we're diving into tonight. You, my frostbitten friend, are the hunter. It's the early 14th century. You've been out since before the sun came up, following deer tracks through crusty snow, trying not to alert anything with a heartbeat. You've got a rough sack of gear slung over one shoulder, a crooked bow in the other, and every bone in your body is cold. The sun is going down now, turning the edges of the forest amber, but also signalling that you've got maybe an hour before temperatures plummet and the wilderness becomes a frosted tomb. And here's the thing, you probably won't survive this, unless you know what you're doing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. No pressure. Also, let me know what city you're in and what time you're watching this. Always curious as how many of you are up way too late. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boots crunch across the snowpack as you scout for a place to sleep, somewhere out of the wind, but close enough to your kill that it won't get dragged off by wolves. The deer was a lucky shot, hit right in the heart. It bucked and fickled hard just past the frozen creek, legs skidding on the ice. Now it's gutted and led out, hanging by its hocks from a pine tree, the rope biting into the bark. You'll butcher it in the morning. Right now, you need to not die. You scan the terrain. To the north, there's a thick copse of spruce, low branches that make a natural windbreak. To the west, a rock overhang that could give some shelter, but it's exposed to open field. You go with the spruce, wading into the shadowy green where needles crunch underfoot and the world feels eerily quiet. There are rabbit tracks in the snow and the musky stink of fox urine. Signs of life, sure, but nothing big enough to threaten your sleep. Probably. Your fingers are already numb, so you set your gear down and get to work. First, build a bed. You use your knife to cut a bunch of spruce boughs, thick, flexible, still fragrant despite the cold. Layer by layer, you build a mattress about a foot thick. This part is crucial. If you sleep on the ground, you will freeze from the bottom up. No medieval hunter forgets that twice. The forest darkens. Dusk here is like ink bleeding across parchment, slow, then suddenly everywhere. You can see your breath. You pull your wool cloak tighter around your shoulders, tugging the hood up until only your eyes peek out. Underneath, your tunic's thick, but not thick enough. And the truth is, medieval hunters didn't carry a change of clothes. What you wore at dawn is what you'll wear until the thaw, and if it gets wet, well, you better like the colour blue. As you settle down onto your spruce bed, every joint stiff and complaining, you reflect on one of the more bizarre truths of this lifestyle. A lot of the gear you use isn't made for comfort. Your sleeping bag isn't really a bag. It's a coarse wool blanket wrapped around sheepskin, held closed with leather thongs. It's scratchy, smelly, and occasionally still has lanolin in it, but it traps heat better than anything else you've got. You wrap it around yourself like a cocoon, tucking in your legs first, then pulling the top over your shoulders. And here's your first real challenge. You can't light a fire. Well, you could, but that would be asking for company. The sort of company that howls, or steals, or carries axes. Fires are signals, beacons in the dark, and unless you're camping with a party or deep in royal forest lands, where bandits fear the gallows, fire's more of a danger than a help. So you sleep cold. You do what medieval hunters called a cold camp, a silent dark bivouac in the forest where heat comes from breath and insulation, not flame. It's risky but not uncommon. In fact, it is a practiced art. You position yourself carefully, back to a tree, knees tucked in tight, hands between thighs. Your cloak becomes both sleeping bag and tent, forming a little microclimate around your body. And still it's freezing. That's the thing modern people forget. These hunters weren't invincible. Frostbite was common. Hypothermia a constant threat. There's even debate among historians about how many disappearances in medieval forests were really just solo hunters frozen solid, found weeks later by truffle pigs or woodcutters. And yet, somehow, they survived. Enough of them at least to pass these skills down. You listen to the forest. A distant owl hoots. Snow shifts somewhere nearby, maybe a rabbit, maybe something else. Your body starts to shiver, not violently, just that low, involuntary shake that feels like your bones are trying to warm themselves. It's not ideal, but it's also not fatal. Yet. Above you, the branches shift, letting moonlight spill across the snow like spilled milk. You feel small, wild, alive in a way most people never do. Because here, with the world frozen solid around you, your breath visible in the air and death just a few bad choices away, you get it. You understand why these hunters lived on the edge. It's not just the meat. It's the clarity, the silence, the absolute honesty of cold. You shift in your bedding and try to find a position where your knees stop aching. There's a bit of warmth now, just a hint. Enough to stop the worst of the shivers. Maybe even enough for sleep. Maybe. Out here, comfort is relative. You wake up with a grunt, because of course you do. No one ever talks about how awful medieval sleep was. It's not peaceful, it's not deep. It's a half-conscious drift, interrupted every 20 minutes by some freezing toe, aching joint, or creeping anxiety that something is sniffing you from the tree line. And honestly, something probably is. Your breath fogs in front of your face. Your nose is numb. Your fingers curled instinctively under your cloak during the night, and they're tingling now in that painful thawing way. You stayed alive, but barely. And this is a good night. The first thing on your mind isn't food. It's layers. You sit up slowly, your spine cracks in at least 4 places, and you start adjusting your clothes like your life depends on it, because it kind of does. See, what you wear out here isn't just about keeping warm, it's about managing moisture, preserving body heat, and avoiding death by bad fashion. Let's go top to bottom. On your head, you've got a coif, tight-fitting linen cap worn under a wool hood. It traps heat around your scalp and keeps your ears from falling off in the night. Most people think hoods are just for dramatic entrances and stormy castles, but in the forest, they're survival gear. You keep the wool dry at all costs. If your hood gets wet, the cold will wick straight into your skull. There are records of hunters freezing to death after their hoods got soaked by snowmelt or sleet, and they couldn't dry them fast enough. A soggy head is a dead head. Your torso is wrapped in layers like you're a human onion. Closest to the skin is a linen shirt, because linen dries faster than wool and helps wick sweat away. Over that, a thick wool tunic, maybe even 2. There's no such thing as too much wool, only not enough. And over that, you've got your cloak, an oversized, heavy woolen blanket with a clasp at the throat, worn like a cape but built for misery. It's itchy, smelly, and soaked in old animal grease, but that just makes it more water resistant. Now, your legs. This is where things get questionable. Medieval hunters didn't have insulated leggings or fleece thermals. You're probably wearing brays, basically medieval boxer shorts, under wool chausses, which are like wool leg tubes tied to a belt or your tunic. They sag, they itch, and they absolutely suck when they get wet. If you're lucky, they're a felted. If you're not, they're just loosely spun wool and you're going to feel every gust of wind like a slap. But the worst part, your feet. Medieval boots are terrible. They're made of turn shoes, leather soles turned inside out and stitched with flax or sinew. No insulation, no tread, just cold, stiff cowhide that soaks up water like a sponge. Hunters knew this, of course, so they hacked the system. You tear off a strip of deer hide and wrap it around your boots like makeshift gaiters. You stuff dry grass or moss into the toes for insulation. Some even wrap wool rags around their feet before sliding into their boots, layering up like a desperate sandwich. Still, it's never enough. There's a historical account of a hunter in Bavaria who survived a snowstorm by removing his boots entirely and wrapping his bare feet in rabbit pelts, stuffing them into an extra cloak and hobbling like that for 3 days. Extreme? Yes. Effective? Also yes. Medieval people didn't wait for the REI catalogue to solve problems. They used what they had, or they died. Now here's a quirky little detail. Socks. Most people think socks were just another piece of clothing, but for a lot of medieval hunters, socks were considered semi-luxury items. If you had wool socks, hand-knitted and tight to the calf, you were basically royalty out here. More often, hunters would use foot wraps, strips of cloth bound around the foot, changed daily to avoid frostbite. Kind of a boot liner / band-aid / hope you don't trip solution. The debates about clothing go on even today. Some historians argue that medieval layering was more advanced than we give it credit for. Others point out the evidence for frostbite in skeletal remains and suggests even the best layers weren't always enough. The thing is, the average hunter wasn't outfitted like a knight or nobleman. He wore what he could scrounge, stitch or skin. It wasn't pretty, but it worked, sometimes. You shift again, checking your gear. Your cloak has frost along the edges, tiny crystals catching in the morning light. You brush them off before they melt and soak in. Then, just out of instinct, you check your boots. Yep, still stiff. You knock them against a tree trunk to shake loose the frozen dirt. Here's something you don't think about until you're actually in the woods. Once your feet get cold, your whole body feels colder. That's why every morning, medieval hunters spend 10 solid minutes warming their feet. You stamp, you rub, you wiggle your toes like you're trying to start a fire in your boots. Some even held their feet over a lit torch, just close enough to thaw them, not close enough to ignite. It's not elegant. But again, cold kills. You stand up, legs groaning, spine protesting, and take your first few steps through the snow. The sun is low, a sickly gold bleeding through the trees. Everything's silent. No wind yet, but you can feel it building. Winter has a rhythm, and the breeze always kicks up after dawn. You start moving, not just to hunt, but to stay warm. Standing still is a death sentence. You shoulder your bow, your fingers still ache. You suck in a lungful of cold air, and it feels like swallowing knives. Still, you're alive. That's already a win. And as you crunch through the snow, adjusting your hood, flexing your hands, you realize something odd. You're getting used to it. The cold, the discomfort, the 1,000 tiny miseries of wilderness living. It doesn't scare you anymore. It just is. Like your boots, like your itchy wool, like the quiet. By the time you reach the creek again, the deer is stiff, its legs frozen into odd angles, and the rope has frosted over with tiny white thorns. Your fingers hesitate before touching it, because rope burns are one thing, but rope frostbite, that's something you'll never forget. You tap it with the back of your knuckle instead, frozen solid, just like your boots, just like your nose, just like every exposed inch of your body. Which brings us to the next harsh medieval reality. If your feet go, you go. You think you're cold now. Try sleeping with wet boots in sub-zero temperatures and waking up to find your toes blackened and numb. Or better yet, waking up and not feeling your toes at all. That's the terrifying part. Frostbite sneaks up on you like a thief. One moment you're uncomfortable, the next you're watching a blackened toe fall off in your sock, and yes, that actually happened to people, more than you'd like to know. You bend to check your footwear, sighing at the familiar stiffness. The boots aren't fancy. They are cobbled from thick leather, softened with tallow, then reinforced at the toe with extra hide. No soles, just layers of hide-on-hide stitched with waxed thread. Waterproof? Ha! Not a chance. The snow gets in every crevice and the cold presses in like it's got something to prove. The inside of your boots are packed with dried moss, a trick you learned from an older hunter who used to sleep with 2 full rabbit skins shoved into each boot. He called it field luxury. That same man swore by wrapping his feet in strips of linen before walking long distances, then replacing them before sleep. You scoffed at first, not anymore. The ritual is always the same. You remove the boot carefully, always one at a time just in case you need to bolt, and quickly inspect your foot. Bluish toes? Not great. You flex them, rub them, and sigh when feeling comes back. Then it's fresh moss from your pouch, tightly packed into the boot. It's scratchy and dry and smells faintly of damp earth and whatever rodent last lived in it, but it works. You know what's funny? Medieval people didn't even expect comfort. They expected pain, expected frostbite, expected misery. There's a kind of strange peace in that, like, if you're constantly on the edge of losing a toe, you never get too comfortable. Keeps you sharp, keeps you humble. Still, not every hunter accepted frostbite as a given. Some of the more clever ones hacked the system. There are scattered references, old field notes, marginal scribbles in herbals, even rumours passed down orally, about natural insulation tricks. One method involved stripping fresh bark from a birch tree and lining your boots with the papery skin. Others involved heating flat stones near a fire, wrapping them in cloth and sliding them into the base of your boot before bed. Risky, yes, burns happened, but desperate times, desperate souls. Then there's the fringe theory that some hunters believed in foot charms, literally charms, like don't get frostbite amulets. Supposedly certain herbal satchels, usually sage, garlic and crushed juniper, were worn around the ankle and blessed by a local wise woman to keep the ice demons away. Total superstition? Probably. But you think about it sometimes when the wind howls and your toes go numb. You wouldn't say no to a little magical insurance. Some scholars still argue about how common frostbite really was in the Middle Ages. Some suggest it was exaggerated, an invention of later dramatists to paint hunting life as more rugged than it actually was. Others point to evidence from frozen remains and church burial records suggesting it was a very real and frequent cause of death in colder regions. What's certain is that medieval hunters learned to read the signs. Numbness, swelling, discoloration. Once your skin turned into waxy and pale, you were on borrowed time. That's when you started weighing your options: amputate, cauterize, or pray. You shudder at the memory of a friend, a trapper, who once tried to warm his frozen foot too fast by dunking it into hot water. That foot never looked the same again. Swelled up like boiled leather. Smelled worse. He limped for the rest of his short life. That's why you go slow. Warmth comes back in stages. Never rush it. After repacking your boots and standing slowly, you shake the stiffness from your knees and start pacing a small circle. Walking keeps the blood moving. You stamp. You flex. You look like a deranged dance instructor, but it helps. The ground crunches beneath you hard as stone and the snow squeaks. That telltale sound of ultra-cold powder. You know it well. The squeak means it's colder than yesterday, probably by a few degrees. You hate that you know that. And then something remarkable happens. Your feet actually start to feel warm. Well, not warm. Less dead. You take another lap. Just movement. Constant movement. That's your best defense. Still, the fear never leaves. You always wonder, did I do enough? Are my toes actually okay, or is this just the numb calm before the gangrenous storm? The cold does weird things to your mind, it breeds paranoia. And it's not always wrong. With the deer still frozen and the sun rising slow behind the trees, you know you've got a few hours before you can really start butchering. The muscles are still stiff. No point in hacking at meat that fights back like cured leather. So you focus on what you can do. Care for your body, adjust your gear, and, most importantly, keep those boots as dry as possible. You glance at them one last time. Cracked leather, twine bindings, faint blood stain from last week's hunt. They've seen better days, but they've seen worse too. And hey, you're still walking. That counts for something. The thought of Bayer starts to itch at the back of your brain. You can picture it. The golden flicker, the sharp snap of dry pine. That holy feeling when the heat finally finds your fingertips. It's primal, instinctual, it's survival. But in this particular patch of forest on this frigid morning, fire is not a luxury you can indulge. Because here's the awful truth. Fire can get you killed. You kneel by your gear, brushing frost from the hide-wrapped bundle that passes as your supply sack. It holds a flint striker, a shard of steel, and a few bits of charcloth wrapped in waxed linen. The setup is good, reliable. If you wanted to, you could spark a flame in 60 seconds, but you hesitate. Because fire, as much as it offers comfort, also offers visibility. And out here, visibility is dangerous. In the tangled chaos of medieval politics and land rights, a fire means something. It tells passers-by, human or animal, that someone's here. In some forests, that someone might be a poacher, or a runaway, or a deserter. A warm glow in the night attracts attention, and attention isn't always friendly. Worse, some hunting lands were protected by royal decree. Lighting a fire inside a nobleman's forest? That's not just risky, that's grounds for imprisonment, or hanging. You've heard the stories, firelight flickering through the trees, followed by the sharp thrum of a crossbow string. No warning, just a bolt and silence. Still you're freezing. There's a technique some hunters use, a compromise. It's called a star fire, or sometimes a sleeper's nest. You start by digging a shallow trench, maybe a foot deep and 2 feet long, and in the bottom you place dry sticks and a few coals wrapped in bark or moss. Then you cover it with a layer of dirt, just enough to mute the glow, but not snuff the heat. The result? A thin ribbon of warmth rising from the ground, enough to keep your torso warm while you sleep. Not hot, but better than nothing. You consider it, maybe later. For now, you rub your hands together, pull your hood tighter, and move to the base of a tree where the snow is thin. You dig a small depression, gather some dry pine needles, and set them in a neat bundle. Not to burn, just to insulate. The pine needles release a faint, sharp scent. Clean, almost medicinal. You lie on your side beside them, pulling your cloak tight, letting your body heat slowly build beneath the folds of wool. You imagine this is what it feels like to be buried alive, but on purpose. Some hunters carry a small ceramic pot, nothing fancy, just a fist-sized vessel designed to hold embers. They'll light it before sundown, tuck it into the centre of their bedding, and let the gentle heat radiate through the night. Others use stones, heated near a fire and then wrapped in cloth. There's risk involved: burns, melted cloaks, accidental flare-ups. But again, everything out here is a gamble. One of the strangest heat hacks you've ever seen involved animal fat. A hunter smeared bear grease across his chest and legs, claiming it sealed in body heat and repelled moisture. He stank like a butcher's table in July, but he didn't freeze. Fringe method? Absolutely. Effective? Apparently. You're not there yet, but you keep the idea in your back pocket. There's a curious debate among historians about whether medieval hunters truly avoided fire out of necessity, or if it was just a romantic myth born of troubadour ballads and embellished tales. Some records suggest that hunting parties did use small, carefully shielded fires, especially in more deep wilderness. Others insist they relied almost entirely on body heat, insulation, and sheer stubbornness. The truth probably lives somewhere in between, like most things. You know that in some parts of Europe, especially in dense forests like the Ardennes or Black Forest, hunters would build what they called sleep shelters. Not real cabins, just quick lean-tos made of pine boughs and snow-packed walls. Inside they'd light a candle, not a fire, just a stub of wax or tallow, to ward off the psychological toll of absolute darkness. It doesn't warm you much, but the flicker of light, that's sometimes enough to keep madness at bay, because the dark out here isn't just absence of light, it's weight, pressure. It folds around you, hums in your ears. After a few nights alone, your mind starts playing tricks. You hear footsteps that aren't there, breathing that isn't yours. That tiny spark in a wax dish suddenly feels like a lifeline. You chew on a piece of dried meat, tough as old leather, but high in salt. The act of chewing helps warm your ses, gets the blood moving in your jaw. You shift your position, draw your knees toward your chest, and nestle deeper into your bedding. The deer still hangs motionless in the distance, a silhouette against the trees. You'll deal with it soon. Right now, you let your eyes close, not to sleep, just to rest. The chill doesn't go away, but your body begins to adapt. The constant trembling quiets down. You've passed the first danger, exposure. If you can hold out for another hour, you'll reach the second phase, endurance. That's when the cold stops being an enemy and becomes a condition, like hunger or loneliness, still dangerous, but manageable. You think again about fire, not just warmth, but the sound of it, the way flames crack and shift, the hiss of sap cooking out of green wood. You miss it. The medieval world was full of fire. Hearths, torches, ovens, iron forges, but not here. Out here it's the luxury you can't afford. Still, maybe tonight, if the wind dies down, if the sky stays clear, if no other hunter, or worse, comes sniffing through these trees, for now, you curl tighter, let the cloak do its job, and whisper to yourself the same thing every hunter does, deep in the cold, in the silence, in the dark. Just don't fall asleep cold. Eventually the sun climbs high enough that the trees stop blocking it, and a thin wash of light spills across your makeshift camp. It doesn't bring much warmth, more of a polite gesture than actual heat. But still, you feel a faint flicker of relief. You made it through the night, which is no small feat, especially out here, where even the stars feel cold. Now it's time to use what little energy you've regained to set up for the next sleep. Because that's the trick no one tells you about this life. Surviving the day is just prep for surviving the next night. You stretch out your arms and shake the stiffness from your legs. Your knees protest, your shoulders creak, but you're moving, and that's a win. The deer is still frozen and stiff, but at least it hasn't been disturbed. No drag marks, no bite wounds. That means the predators stayed away, for now. You'll deal with it soon. Right now you're focused on one thing, building a bed that doesn't suck. See, in the medieval wilderness, sleep isn't just rest, it's risk management. It's about insulation, protection, and ideally, not waking up with a squirrel nesting in your armpit. So you grab your little hatchet, rough iron, worn smooth at the grip, and head for the trees. You start cutting spruce boughs again, the blade biting through the soft, fragrant limbs with a satisfying snap. The needles are short and sharp, but perfect for bedding. You pile them thick, layering them in a rectangular pad that's just long enough for your body and a little wider than your shoulders. You remember what the old tracker told you once. Build it like a nest, not a bench. That means curves, not corners, soft dips, not flat slab. You're trying to trap your own heat, not feel like you're sleeping on a church pew. It's slow work. Your hands go numb more than once. You stop to breathe on them, shove them under your armpits, curse under your breath. But eventually the bed is done, at least 2 feet off the ground now, thanks to clever stacking and a bit of dirt you mounded beneath it. It smells like Christmas and desperation. You sit on it to test the give. It creaks but holds. Next step, hides. You drag out your roll of sleeping gear, a crumpled mess of sheepskin, tattered wool and one very fragrant goatskin cloak, and start arranging it like a bird lining a ghost nest. The sheepskin goes on the bottom, fur side up, because that's your buffer against the chill. The wool gets layered over your midsection where heat loss is most dangerous, and the goatskin, that one you keep for your shoulders, mostly because it still smells vaguely like a barn and no predator wants to tangle with that. Once it's all arranged, you crawl into the setup and shift around. The spruce pokes through in places, but overall it's good. Way better than sleeping straight on snow or bare dirt, which, by the way, is the fastest way to become a popsicle. The ground steals warmth. Even in summer, sleeping directly on it sucks the life out of you. In winter, it's like lying on the cold, indifferent chest of death itself. You think of the odd materials medieval hunters would sometimes use to keep warm. Dry hay was a favourite, easy to pack, light, surprisingly good at trapping heat. You've seen people stuff it into their cloaks, their boots, even under their hats. One guy once filled his entire tunic with straw and waddled around like a walking mattress. He looked ridiculous. He also didn't freeze. Then there are the real fringe methods. One old-timer swore by carrying warm rocks in a leather pouch, taken from a fire and buried beneath his bedding. Another swore that sleeping with a flask of warm beer tucked between your thighs was the key to not dying. That same man also claimed to talk to trees, so, grain of salt. Some hunters would use animal hides, fresh ones. Like very fresh, kill something, skin it, wrap yourself in it before the heat leaves. It's gross, it's sticky, but it works. You once saw a man sleep inside the gutted carcass of a boar during a storm, climbed in like as it was a sleeping bag made by Satan. He made it through the night, though, can't argue with results. There's also the buddy system, 2 hunters, 1 bed, not out of affection, though maybe sometimes. But because shared body heat is no joke, you press 2 cloaked, half-frozen bodies together under one hide and you trap a lot more warmth. It's awkward at first, sure, but then again, so is dying. You lie back on your spruce bed, letting the pine scent fill your nose. It's surprisingly calming. You can almost pretend it's a proper bed, minus the cold wind, the creaking trees, and the very real possibility that a wolf might stroll by. You tuck the goatskin tighter and close your eyes. The debate among historians about medieval bedding materials is oddly fierce. Some claim that peasants and hunters had easy access to coarse linen and wool scraps. Others argue that many slept directly on straw mats or even packed leaves. The truth is probably both. In towns, scraps and stitched bedding were common. In the wild, you used what you found, and what you find out here is mostly sticks. Still, there's something satisfying about building a bed from nothing. You created this little pocket of warmth in a hostile, uncaring forest. It may be primitive, but it's yours. You survived the night before, and with this setup you just might survive the next. You shift again, feeling the soft prick of pine beneath your shoulder blade. Annoying, but also strangely comforting. It means you're not dead. It means the bed is working. You stare up through the branches, watching the sky shift from grey to pale blue. No snow today, maybe. Just cold wind and long hours. And eventually another sleep in this nest of sticks and fur and hope. Because that's what this bed is, really. It's hope, wrapped in wool, smelling faintly of goat, held together with twine and prayer. The wind picks up sometime after midday, not a howling gale, but one of those persistent, bone-slicing breezes that cuts through even the thickest wool like it's not there. It snakes between the trees, stirs the snow into soft, swirling ghosts, and makes your already numb face feel like it's being shaved by ice. You hunch deeper into your cloak, hands tucked into your armpits, eyes squinting into the pale glare bouncing off the snow. There's no real sun, just a weak smear of light above the treetops. More of a concept than a presence. You're not going to move far today. No long hike, no new trap set. The deer you bagged yesterday is still frozen solid. And butchering it in this temperature would turn your fingers into brittle, red icicles. You'll wait until the afternoon when, hopefully, the sun has done at least some of the work for you. In the meantime, you need to rest. And the thing is, out here, rest doesn't always mean lying down. In fact, sometimes you sleep upright. It's not comfortable, not even remotely, but in the right situation, with the right gear or lack thereof, it can be the difference between life and death, especially when the ground's too cold, too exposed, or just plain unsafe. You find a good tree, not too thick, not too thin, a spruce with a slight lean to it and low branches that provide some cover. You clear away the snow at the base with your boot and start assembling what passes for a sleep station. First, you pile a ring of pine branches at your feet, thick enough to keep your toes off the frost. Then you create a sort of backrest, more branches stacked behind you in a rough wedge. It's not comfortable, but that's not the point. You lower yourself into position, back to the tree, legs pulled up slightly, cloak wrapped tightly around you and pinned beneath your legs to trap warmth. Then comes the trick. You tie yourself in, seriously. Using a length of rope or even just a few strips of hide, you fasten your torso to the tree, one loop across the chest, one around the waist. Not too tight, you want to breathe, but firm enough that if you doze off you won't slump sideways and collapse into the snow. And yes, this is a real thing. Hunters called it tree sleep, and it wasn't as rare as you'd think. Some used trees for safety. If you were in boar country or near wolf dens, lying on the ground was asking to be pawed or gored in your sleep. Upright, half dozing, you stayed semi-alert, close enough to rest but ready to bolt. Others just used it because they had no choice. Ground too wet, snow too deep, or maybe they lost their bedding, maybe it burned. Maybe it was stolen. The forest doesn't care, and it's not just hunters who did this. There are scattered references in old chronicles and oral histories to charcoal burners, woodcutters, even travelling monks using the upright sleep method. Some had special cloaks designed with interior loops, tie points so you could literally hang yourself in place like some kind of upright burrito. You laugh at the thought, but not too loud. Because honestly, you'd buy that cloak. It's hard to fall asleep like this at first. Your knees ache, your neck droops, the rope across your chest feels like an impatient hand. But over time, you get used to it. Your body starts to associate this awkward, upright posture with rest. Not real sleep, just the hazy, half-dreaming doze of the wilderness. Enough to recharge without losing total awareness. That awareness matters, especially when predators are involved. You've heard it before, late at night from deep within the woods, a branch cracking where it shouldn't, the low rumble of something breathing, the soft pads of paws through snow. It's subtle, easy to miss, but it's always there. Once, a hunter you knew fell asleep flat on his back after a long chase. Tied up his kill, got a little too warm by the fire and passed out. He woke up to find a wolf sniffing his boots. Didn't attack, just curious, but the man nearly died of fright. And the worst part? He'd taken off his boots to dry them by the fire, so he ran, barefoot, through the snow for nearly a mile. Upright sleep wouldn't have prevented the wolf, but maybe he'd have heard it sooner. Maybe he wouldn't have had to hobble through the snow with bleeding feet and tear-streaked cheeks. You tighten the rope a little more and try to relax. There's something strangely meditative about it. Your breath puffs slowly in the cold air, your eyelids dip, and your thoughts blur into that liminal space between dream and wakefulness. You're aware of every creak in the forest, every whisper of wind, but your muscles at least are allowed to sag slightly, to soften. You dream briefly, brokenly, of warm fires and thick quilts, a bed stuffed with feathers, a roof, maybe even a cat curled at your feet. But then you wake to the bite of cold wind on your cheek, and the fantasy crumbles like frost underfoot. Some fringe hunters claimed that sleeping upright kept your dreams closer to the earth, like the cold rooted your thoughts, prevented nightmares, grounded your soul. Others said it was madness, that sleep like this fractured the mind, made men hear voices in the trees. Honestly, both sound true depending on the night. Historians still argue about the logistics of upright sleep. Some say it's exaggerated, that most of it was likely just huddled rest, not full-on sleep. Others claim there are enough scattered records to suggest it was a common enough practice, especially during long hunts or in war-torn regions where sleeping prone meant vulnerability. You shift again, your thighs numb, your back sore, but your eyes still heavy. You know you'll need to lie down eventually. Your blood needs to circulate. Your muscles need relief. But this This buys you time. An hour or two of upright rest might be all it takes to give you the strength to butcher your kill, set a fire safely, maybe even build a better shelter. You're not looking for luxury, you're just trying to make it one more night. The wind rattles the branches above. You blink slowly, tethered to your tree like some weird wool-wrapped fruit. And for a moment, just a moment, the cold doesn't feel so sharp. When you finally ease yourself out of the tree ropes, your knees pop like dry twigs. It's not so much waking up as it is unfurling, slow stiff with a muttered curse or two. Your cloak is damp with your own breath, especially around the mouth and chin, where the fabric froze during your upright nap. You tug it down and wince as tiny ice crystals scrape against your beard. Welcome to the medieval wilderness exfoliation routine. Free of charge, painfully effective. Your face is raw, lips cracked, nose frozen. But the worst part, your beard is a disaster. No one talks about this. They should, because in the cold your beard becomes both a saviour and a curse. On one hand, it traps warmth around your face, keeps your cheeks from going completely numb, and gives you a kind of feral mountain man dignity. On the other hand, it holds moisture like a sponge. Every exhale settles into the hair around your mouth. Then it freezes. Then it melts. Then it freezes again. By dawn, it's basically a chin icicle, with bonus ice fangs curling inwards toward your lips. You rub at it now, trying to break up the frost. Little chunks fall away and land on your cloak. The tips of your fingers go numb again, which you ignore, because what choice do you have? It's not like you packed a warm towel and beard oil. To deal with this, medieval hunters had a simple rule. Never breathe directly into your beard. Always turn your head slightly, exhale to the side. If you're desperate, wrap your lower face in cloth. Linen if you have it, wool if you must. It's not fashionable, but it works. You reach for your hood and pull the inner flap across your nose and mouth, tying it behind your head with a strip of leather cord. It smells like old tallow and sheep, but it does the job. And yes, face wraps were absolutely a thing. You'd be surprised how often they show up in woodcuts and manuscripts, usually as tightly wound scarves or makeshift balaclavas. In places like the Scottish Highlands or the Carpathians, hunters and travellers swore by them. Some were made from felted wool, others from layers of linen soaked in fat to make them wind-resistant. The goal wasn't beauty, it was survival. You're not immune to the ridiculousness of it all. You catch your reflection in the frozen creek, just a flicker distorted in the cracked ice. You look like someone tried to wrap a pile of laundry around a shovel. But hey, your face is slightly warmer now. That's progress. There's a fringe theory among modern researchers that some medieval hunters intentionally grew thick beards as a kind of natural insulation. Not for style, not for faith, just because the bigger your beard, the warmer your jaw. There's even an old French hunting manual that refers to a man's winter coat about the chin, though whether that was meant literally or as mockery is still up for debate. Either way, beards had their place. Of course, if you couldn't grow one, you had to improvise. You once met a hunter who stitched a beard out of sheepskin scraps and tied it to his face with twine. It worked, kind of, but he got laughed out of 3 camps in a row. Still, you respect the creativity. The cold doesn't care about your pride, and speaking of the cold, your breath is now curling visibly around your face in thick, lazy spirals. That's the telltale sign that the temperature's dropped again. Not quite a plunge, but a steady slide into frostbite is back on the menu territory. You sniff once, your nostrils stick together, definitely colder. This is where your hood earns its keep. You pull it forward, letting the wool drape heavily over your face. It's not fancy, just a simple medieval liripipe style. Long tail at the back, snug at the neck, cut wide at the shoulders. Designed for layering, wind resistance, and best of all, stealth. Good hood muffles the sound of your breath and your footsteps. The long tail can be wrapped around your neck like a scarf or used to tie the whole thing tighter in a high wind. Some hunters even used it as a makeshift pouch for carrying coals or hot stones. Multi-use gear before it was trendy. You tuck your hands into the sleeves and start pacing again, trying to warm yourself from the core outward. Face still wrapped, body still stiff but functional. That's all you need. The face covering holds in the heat, traps moisture just enough to make breathing bearable, and shields your skin from the slicing wind. Of course, there's a trade-off. Once the fabric gets too damp, it starts freezing again. This leads to what hunters used to call ice burn, basically frostbite caused by your own clothing. The solution? Swap it out midday if possible, or rotate it around your face so the wettest part isn't sitting directly against your skin. It's not perfect, but you're not exactly spoiled for options. You remember once, years ago, waking up with your hood frozen to your cheek, tore off a layer of skin when you moved. You wore that scab for a month, like a badge of honour or stupidity. And let's not forget, frostbite on the face is no joke. Your nose, your cheeks, your ears, these are the first things to go in extreme cold, ears especially. That's why the hood is low, the scarf is high, and the cloak collar gets pulled up so far you look like a woolen turtle. Some hunters even stuffed fur scraps under their hoods, foxtails, rabbit pelts, anything soft and warm to guard the cartilage. As you walk, you pull a strip of dried apple from your pouch and chew slowly. It's tough, leathery, and faintly sweet. The sugar helps, gives your brain something to focus on besides the cold. Your breath still fogs the air, but now it smells faintly of fruit and old wool. Somehow that's comforting. You catch another gust of wind and instinctively hunch your shoulders. The hood holds. The wrap holds. Your beard, still frosted and coarse, holds too. Everything in its right place. You glance up. The sky's turned a pale, ugly grey. Storm maybe, or just the threat of one. Either way, it's a warning. You'll need to prep your bed again, check your hide bundle, and maybe even find a thicker patch of trees to hunker down in. Tonight could be rougher, but your face, your face is ready. You catch the smell before you hear the sound. Musky, thick, a little sour like wet hay left too long in a cellar. You stop mid-step, nostrils flaring, ears straining through the cold silence. There's something alive nearby, not predator alive. Not dangerous, just pungent. You creep forward a few more steps and peer through the dense tangle of spruce. And there they are. 3 pigs, not wild boars, those you'd hear crashing through the underbrush like drunken bandits. These are domestic, squat-bodied, winter-hardened swine, probably left to free range by some village a few valleys over. You can't help but smile. Pigs mean heat. Now, under normal circumstances, cuddling with a pig would not be high on your winter survival strategy list. But these aren't normal circumstances. You're in a medieval forest in the middle of a deep freeze, and your options for warmth are rapidly dwindling. So when you see livestock wandering through the snow like little steaming sausages on legs, you don't think twice. You ease closer, moving slow, careful not to startle them. They don't run. They glance up, snort once, and go back to rooting under the snow. One's already wallowed into a little hollow and is now lying belly flat, huffing in the cold. You decide he's your new best friend. This might sound ridiculous, maybe even a little tragic, but sleeping near livestock for warmth was extremely common among medieval hunters, herders, and just about anyone stuck out in the elements overnight. Pigs were surprisingly popular choices, unlike sheep, which are skittish and overly delicate, or goats, which have all the warmth of a judgmental houseplant. Pigs are thick-bodied, heat-retaining, and weirdly tolerant of human proximity, especially if you smell bad enough. And right now, you definitely do. You circle around and sit down beside the resting pig, slowly shifting until your side is pressed against its flank. It doesn't flinch. In fact, it grunts, shifts slightly, and accepts your presence like a fellow pig. Good enough. The warmth is immediate. Startling even. Like someone lit a small fire beneath your hip. You haven't felt direct body heat like this in days. It doesn't take long before you're leaning in, head resting against the pig's shoulder, cloak draped over both of you like some strange low-budget shepherd costume. Another pig plods over, sniffs your foot and lies down nearby. Within minutes, you've got yourself a very awkward but incredibly effective heating system. And let's be clear, it's gross. The pig stinks, not in a maybe it needs a bath kind of way, but in a deep primal fermented garbage kind of way. It's an earthy, greasy smell with hints of manure, old fur, and body heat baked into the wool of your cloak. You should hate it, but you don't. Because for the first time in hours, you don't feel like your bones are rattling from the inside. This wasn't just a fringe practice. Sleeping beside animals was a widely known survival strategy, especially in colder regions. Hunters would often tether a donkey or dog to their sleeping area, not just for company or security, but for insulation. Body heat was body heat. Didn't matter if it came from your comrade or a pig. In some extreme cases, entire hunting parties would huddle around a cow for warmth, forming a kind of miserable shivering meat halo around the beast. There's an old Hungarian folktale about a trapper who survived a 7-day snowstorm by digging a pit and crawling in with his ox. They shared body heat under a shared hide, and when the storm cleared, the man emerged warm and alive. The ox allegedly didn't even notice. Now, the risks? Yeah, they were real. You get too cozy with a pig and you might wake up with a hoof to the ribs or a snout in your face. They snore, they twitch, they roll, and they're heavy. One careless flop and you could end up pinned in your sleep. But most seasoned hunters knew how to position themselves safely, side by side, not under the belly. Always with a quick exit plan. You're dozing now, eyelids fluttering against the wind, your head bouncing slightly with each of the pig's slow rhythmic breaths. It's bizarre, no doubt, but it's also peaceful. There's something grounding about being huddled up with another living thing, even if it oinks. You remember a conversation with an older woodsman years ago. He told you, half joking, a pig'll save your life quicker than a prayer if it's cold enough. You thought he was just being dramatic, but now you think he might have undersold it. It's not just about heat, it's about presence. Out here, the cold gets inside your head, makes you feel isolated, like the trees are holding their breath, waiting for you to drop. Just knowing there's another heartbeat near yours, even a pig's, reminds you that you're not alone. And in a way, that keeps you going. There's debate, of course. Some historians argue this kind of close contact with animals was exaggerated in lore, an idealized version of the rugged outdoorsman, humble enough to sleep in the mud. Others point to journals, letters, even ecclesiastical writings that mention borrowing heat from the beasts of the field. The truth, somewhere in between, as always. But no one disputes the fact that in the medieval world, warmth was worth the stink. You stretch out a little, the pig grunting in mild protest but not moving. The other two are pressed close now, and the small hollow you're all lying in has started to feel like a real shelter. Walls of flesh and fur, roofed by your own battered cloak. You drift off again, just slightly, the way you do when your body finally says, yes, this I can work with. You'll wake soon and have to move on. Cut meat, pack up, maybe track the pigs and see where they bed down for the night. Could be a better spot, more sheltered. But for now, for this strange and wonderful moment, you're just another creature in the forest, curled against your neighbours, wrapped in warmth and stink and sans-bough. You're not dead. You're not even that cold. And if someone walked past right now, they'd see a bundle of wool and grunts steaming softly in the snow, and they'd think, now there's someone who gets it. By late afternoon, the pigs have wandered off, snorting and snuffling their way through the underbrush in search of frozen roots or abandoned acorns. You let them go. They gave you what you needed. 2 precious hours of heat and some of the best rest you've had since this whole frostbitten ordeal began. You don't even mind the pig hair clinging to your cloak or the faint oink-patterned warmth still radiating from your ribs. You're awake, alert, and more importantly, not frozen solid. Which means it's finally time to deal with the deer. You trudge back to the kill site, the snow crunching beneath your feet in that special way it does when it's cold enough to kill a man with silence. The deer is still suspended from the tree, stiff and dusted with frost. Its eyes have gone glassy white. There's no smell, too cold for that. But the blood frozen along its belly is black and cracked like varnish. You untie the rope slowly, lowering the carcass to the ground, and begin to work. The knife's edge is cold enough to burn your fingertips. Your hands are stiff, your breath wheezing in slow clouds, and the hide resists like frozen leather. Which it is, but you press on, sawing through tendon and skin, peeling back hide with the practiced movements of someone who knows there's no luxury in hesitation. Butchering in winter has its own rhythm. You don't rush, you don't make sudden movements. Every slip could mean a sliced finger or a lost blade in the snow, and while you're working you think not about the meat, not even about how long it'll keep in the cold. You're thinking about dinner, more specifically pre-bed dinner, because what you eat before you sleep out here, that's everything. Modern people worry about carbs, macros, hydration, but out here, in the medieval woods, it's simple. You eat to burn. Food isn't just energy, it's insulation, a buffer between your body and the night. The right meal before sleep can mean the difference between waking up shivering and not waking up at all. You pull a strip of fat from the deer's belly and toss it into your cookpot, a dented piece of blackened iron you've been hauling around like a treasure chest. You add a few chunks of meat, a pinch of dried nettle, a cracked bit of wild garlic bulb you scavenged 2 days ago. Then you gather wood, carefully, low and fast, and build what might be the most sacred thing in the forest, a small legal fire. This part's allowed. You're far enough into neutral land, far from any manor or marked game reserve. No one owns this patch of misery. No steward's going to fine you. No reeve will drag you off in the night. Still, you keep the fire low. A thin, tight blaze built inside a ring of rocks and surrounded on 3 sides by snow-packed spruce limbs. From a distance it won't show, but you'll feel it. As the stew begins to bubble, the smell is intoxicating. Meat, fat, salt, garlic. The kind of meal that gets sung about in inns by men with frostbitten memories. You eat slowly, savouring every greasy, chewy bite. The heat fills your gut like poured stone, heavy, anchoring. The kind of warmth that doesn't just touch your skin, it radiates from inside. Because that's the goal, isn't it? Internal warmth. A kind of living furnace to carry into the night. That's why medieval hunters swore by fat before sleep. Not just meat, fat, geese, bear fat, boar lard, duck grease, anything rich enough to burn slow and long. You knew one hunter who used to drink melted beef tallow before bed, like some unholy broth, said it kept his blood moving all night. He also had a permanent layer of grease in his moustache, but he never got cold. There's some modern debate about the science behind this. Some historians argue that high-fat meals before sleep really did provide thermal benefits. Slower digestion, higher energy output, better circulation. Others say it's more psychological, that it just felt warmer because the body was busy digesting. But most people agree on one thing. In the absence of central heating, eating like a starving bear was a valid strategy. You scrape the last of your stew from the pot and lick the edge clean. Not because you're starving, though you kind of are, but because every drop of grease is precious. You'll even smear some on your boots later to keep the leather supple. Waste nothing, that's the rule. As you clean your knife, you think about other old hunter meals. Porridge thick with animal fat, bread soaked in bone broth, nuts and dried berries pressed into tallow cakes, like medieval protein bars, but somehow worse and better at the same time. The key was density, something your body could slowly convert into heat over hours. None of this light snack nonsense. Sleep cold on an empty stomach and you'll regret it before midnight. You stoke the fire one last time, letting the coals deepen to a slow, steady glow. No flames, just heat. Just enough to warm your back as you prep your bed. Your spruce boughs are still in place. Your hides, your sheepskin, your cloak, all dry, still holding residual warmth from the earlier. You press your hands beneath the fur, feel the heat trapped there like a secret. You slide in slowly, letting the layers settle around you. And then, quietly like a secret, you burp. Just a little. Not exactly elegant, but oh, what a beautiful sound. It means your stomach is full. Your body's at work. The fire inside you has been lit. You pull your hood over your head, nestle deeper into your makeshift nest, and close your eyes. Out here there are no lullabies, no warm milk, no bedtime prayers carved in stone. There is only food, heat, and the silence of the forest. And tonight, thanks to that greasy little stew, you might actually sleep. You wake in the middle of the night, not because of a sound, but because something feels wrong. The kind of wrong that doesn't shout, it just presses. It leans. You open your eyes and stare up at the shifting shadows above, breath fogging into the cold air, ears straining for a sound that never comes. Everything's still. And yet, you're colder than you should be. Not the gradual, the fire's dying kind of cold. This is sharp, direct, like the chill is coming from inside your bedding. You shift cautiously and immediately feel the problem. Something's wet. Not soaking, not puddled, but damp, subtle, insidious. Your heart kicks up a notch. You know this cold, this is the kind that kills. You throw off the edge of your cloak and run your hand over the bedding. The sheepskin is cold, yes, but under it, right where your hip meets the furs, is a thin patch of melted snow. Just a little, just enough to ruin everything. And now you remember. When you gathered spruce boughs earlier, you didn't shake all the snow from them. You were tired, rushed. And now, hours later, that snow has melted from your body heat and seeped down through the bedding, chilling you from below like the ghost of an icy river. You sit up fast, heart thudding, muscles stiff with panic. This isn't dramatic. It's real. Wetness is the reaper's favourite tool in winter. Wet boots, wet sleeves, wet bedding, it doesn't matter. If it's wet and it's touching your skin, you're in trouble. You throw the furs back and examine the area. It's not a full disaster yet. Just a hand-sized patch of damp, icy bedding. But left unchecked, it'll spread, then refreeze, then press that freezing cold into your back until your blood starts retreating into your chest. Medieval hunters knew this drill. If you got wet, you didn't sleep. You moved. You got up, you changed layers if you had them, you flipped your bedding to the dry side, and if all else failed, you walked until dawn because motion was better than cold death. Luckily, you're not soaked. Yet. You shift the damp furs to one side, strip off your outer layer, and hang it near the fire, revived now with a few careful pokes. Then you kneel beside it, arms tucked in, letting the heat crawl back into your skin. You're lucky you caught it early, and that's the lesson tonight. Moisture is the enemy. It's an old rule, older than kings, older than cities. If you get wet out here, you don't survive. There are records of medieval soldiers freezing in their tents during winter campaigns, not because of blizzards, but because of sweat. Yes, sweat, marching hard, body steaming, then stopping for the night with wet wool under the armour. By morning, dozens dead, silent, curled like leaves. You learned that lesson early. On your first solo hunt, you slept in wool chausses after slipping into a creek crossing. Thought you were fine, woke up unable to feel your legs, skin like cold dough. You spent the rest of that day shivering under a cloak, chattering like a skeleton on parade. Now you obsess over staying dry. Even snow is tricky. It seems soft, innocent, but it melts at the slightest touch of heat. Your hands, your breath, your bedding, and then it lingers, soaks in, hides. You know hunters who line their cloaks with waxed linen just to repel snow. You've seen others strip down to their underlayers when hiking uphill, just to avoid sweating under heavy gear. One guy you knew, crazy as a cornered squirrel, would march in just his tunic through snow a mile at a time to stay dry. Claimed frostbite was less deadly than the sweat demon. Maybe he had a point. He still had all his toes. Some folks used oil, rendered fat, to waterproof their gear. Bear fat, if they had it. Or goose grease, rubbed into boots, cloaks, even the seams of sleeping rolls. Made everything stink, of course, but if it kept the water out, it was worth it. There's even an old herbal text that recommends soaking wool in boiled pine resin to create a natural water barrier. Not easy, but evasive. You rub your arms briskly, feeling warmth return to your fingertips. The outer cloak is still damp but manageable. You rotate the bedding, flip your sheepskin to the drier side, and add a fresh layer of pine boughs beneath it. This time brushed clean of snow because lesson learned. It's crude, but it'll work. Enough to survive till morning at least. The fire pops quietly beside you. You glance up, scanning the trees again. Still no sound. No movement. Just the forest, sleeping in its own frozen hush. You lie back down cautiously, nestling into the rearranged bedding. The fire's heat now kissing the back of your cloak. You've lost time and warmth, but you're still dry, enough, and that's what matters. It always surprises people how little it takes to go from fine to in danger. A single drop of meltwater in your boot, a bit of sweat trapped between tunics, the damp belly of a dead rabbit stuffed into your coat. It builds, slowly, quietly, until the cold has a foothold and then it spreads. There's a fringe belief among some old hunters that the cold is a living thing, that it doesn't just happen, it hunts, looks for weakness, finds the softest part of you, your feet, your belly, the back of your neck, and slides in like a knife. You believe it. You pull the dry cloak tighter, shift your feet to a more protected position, and sigh deeply. You're tired now, but not the dangerous kind. Just worn out. You close your eyes again, this time with every part of your body hyper-aware of dampness, cold, pressure. You scan yourself like a guard on patrol, no wet spots, no spreading chill, just wool and hide and slow, calming breath. Tomorrow you'll dry everything properly, spread your bedding out in the sunlight, re-smoke the furs if you have time, maybe even find some wax or render more fat to seal the seams. But tonight, you stay dry, and that might just be enough. There's a moment, maybe an hour before sunrise, when you're not sure if you're asleep or just pretending to be. Everything's still. Your limbs are stiff but not screaming, your mind is quiet for once, and your breath floats up in slow, foggy curls. You can't feel your toes individually, but they don't hurt, which in this world means they're probably still attached. And honestly, that's a win. Then your hand brushes something slick. Not slick like snow. Slick like skin. You flinch, roll, sit up fast. Your sheepskin bedding rustles beneath you, and your cloak slips down from your shoulders as your heartbeat kicks you awake. You reach for your knife, not out of panic, but because reaching for a knife is just what you do out here. Reflex, like breathing. And there it is, slumped in your bedding like some prehistoric laundry bag, the bladder bag. You laugh quietly, a single sharp puff of steam in the cold, because for one fleeting moment you thought it was a snake, or worse, but no, it's just your old half-patched, nearly forgotten sleeping sack, made from the intestines of a sheep and the stitched skins of smaller game. Your medieval sleeping bag, sort of. It's not pretty, it's not warm by modern standards, but it exists. And tonight, it might just save your life. See, medieval hunters didn't have canvas roll-ups or mummy bags with thermal liners, but they did have access to one thing in abundance: animal guts. And when you're cold enough, creativity gets weird. There are scattered accounts, mostly from Eastern Europe and Scandinavia, of hunters, trappers, and even pilgrims using sewn animal skins as sleeping covers. Not just hides with fur, but the inner bits too. Intestines, stomachs, bladders, anything that could be stretched, dried, cleaned, and stitched into something vaguely watertight. What you're holding now is exactly that. A patchwork sausage casing large enough to crawl into. You'd laugh, but you're too tired to feel clever. You slide your feet in first, careful not to snag the edges on your boot buckles. The interior's smooth, slightly crinkled, and smells faintly of cured meat and desperation. The outer layer is reinforced with a layer of thin deer hide stitched together in broad overlapping panels. It's flexible, not quite soft, not quite rigid, just strange but functional. Once your legs are inside, you slide down until your hips settle into the lower curve. Then you tug the top over your torso, folding it across your chest like a waxy burrito. You leave your arms free just in case, but pull your cloak over everything to trap in the heat. And it works. God help you, it actually works. The bladder bag isn't exactly warm, but it traps your body heat in a way no loose cloak ever could. It's airtightish, moisture resistant, and best of all, windproof. You can feel the difference almost immediately. The icy draft that usually creeps up your back during the night is gone. Your breath forms a little dome of warmth inside the opening. You shift slightly, adjust the folds at your hips and settle in. You remember when you first made it. Took 3 days, 4 rabbit bladders, half of a goat's stomach, and one very confusing afternoon spent boiling pig intestines over a smoky fire. You'd read somewhere, probably scratched into a tree or muttered by a toothless trader, that Inuit hunters used seal intestines to make parkas. So you figured, why not? It wasn't glamorous. You ruined your knife. Your hand stank for a week. But the first night you slept inside it, curled up like a fermented dumpling, you were warm, mostly. There's debate about how common these kinds of sleep sacks really were. Some scholars argue they're exaggerated, products of folklore, not fact. Others point to archaeological findings, unusually stitched gut casings, waterproof sleeping rolls made from ox stomachs, even references in monastic texts to bags of hide wherein the hunter lay like Jonah. Whether they were widespread or not, one thing is certain. If someone thought to invent it, someone else thought to sleep in it. Your bladder's bag rustles faintly as you shift. You imagine some modern hiker stumbling upon you like this, wrapped in guts, smelling like firewood and venison fat, your beard frozen into spikes. They'd call it a nightmare. You call it Tuesday. The quirkiest part, it actually helps your breathing. The enclosed space traps moisture in a way that soothes your nose and throat. No more frozen nostrils, no more mouth breathing that leaves your tongue feeling like tree bark. Just slow, warm exhales pooling around your chest. Sure, it smells like a butcher's apron, but it also doesn't smell like death, which is nice. As you drift, you imagine the conversations from centuries past. Grizzled hunters around a fire, sharing sleep hacks. One swears by goose grease, another brags about lining his cloak with dried moss, and one, probably laughed at by the others, pulls out a folded sack of stitched pig gut and says, "Trust me." And somewhere in the background a monk scribbles it all down on parchment, just in case someone, someday, might care. You doze in and out of sleep like that for hours, never fully under, never fully awake, just riding the line. The bladder sack traps your heat. Your cloak mutes the wind. And when the cold does find its way in, usually through the seams, it's too little, too late. You're already resting, already recovering. Your muscles ache, but they aren't spasming. Your jaw isn't clenched. Your knees are pulled up into your chest, tucked against the lining, and your shoulders are finally not hunched. You're warm, or at least warm enough. It's not comfort, but it is containment. And in this part of the world, on this kind of night, that's what survival looks like. By the time the sky starts to lighten, bleeding pale blue through the trees, you've almost forgotten how strange your sleep system is. You stretch inside the sack, joints creaking, and let out a long, slow breath. You survive the night. Again. Because sometimes the difference between freezing and not freezing is a sack full of sheep guts. You're still sticky with sleep when the first sound of the day breaks through the frost, a branch cracking, sharp, sudden, and close enough to slice straight through the haze of rest. You freeze, your breath caught halfway in your throat, ears tuned like a hare's. Another crack, then silence. You don't move, don't breathe, every instinct goes taut. But then nothing. No footsteps, no low growl, no rustle of fur or snapping of more branches. Just that one sudden snap, and the quiet that follows it. Probably a falling limb, maybe ice shifting on a tree trunk, but you know better than to trust silence out here. Silence listens back. You lie there another full minute, unmoving inside your awkward, half-frozen gut sack, like some bizarre creature waiting to be reborn. Finally, you let out a slow breath and begin the process of extraction. Medieval sleeping bags, as it turns out, are amazing for heat retention, but absolutely terrible for graceful exits. You twist, untangle your knees, and wiggle free, leaving the warmth behind like a broken spell. The cold rushes in immediately, biting the skin at your wrists and face and turning the inner layer of your cloak into a wall of damp wool and regret. You move fast now, instinctively, shake out your bedding, hang the gut sack to air out, ideally not near where you're cooking, unless you want breakfast to taste like tripe. Then you turn back to the real work of the morning, checking your traps, because even if you're not freezing to death tonight, you will starve to death eventually if you don't keep gathering food, and that means keeping your camp stocked, which in turn means venturing out. But here's the problem. You're alone, and in the medieval wilderness that's not just inconvenient, it's deeply unnatural. The image of the lone medieval hunter is romantic, sure. One man, one bow, one frosty breath in the forest gloom. But the truth? It was rare, almost suicidal. Most hunters didn't venture out solo, not for long, and definitely not in winter. Not unless they had no other choice. You make your way through the snow, boots crunching softly, eyes flicking side to side. A few yards from your bed you find the first snare, empty. The second, farther down near a thicket of brambles, has been tripped. But no prize. Something got curious, or lucky, or both. You reset it quickly, hands shaking from the cold, then you pause, scanning the woods again, and that same thought returns. You shouldn't be out here alone. Back then, hunting wasn't just about meat. It was about mutual survival. Groups of 2, 3, sometimes more, moved through the forest in patterns. One watched, one tracked. One guarded the gear or the kill. Sleeping arrangements were shared. Tasks were divided. Even just having another voice in the cold made the air feel less deadly. You've travelled with others before, shared bedrolls under snow-laden pines, divvied up rabbit legs cooked over tiny whispering fires. One guy, Marek, swore he could tell the temperature by the pitch of your breath at night. You wheeze like a flute when it drops below freezing, he once said, just before stuffing a squirrel into a stew and calling it forest poultry. You'd laugh if Marek hadn't vanished last winter. Went off on a solo trail to check his traps, never came back, no signs, no tracks, just gone. That's what happens to lone hunters. They disappear. Quietly, efficiently, the forest is good at swallowing people. It's why in most regions, hunters moved in bands or brotherhoods. Some formal, some not. You'd meet at agreed landmarks, stone cairns, twisted trees, charcoal signs marked on bark, and camp together in loosely formed circles. Shared warmth, shared gear, shared watch duties. One sleeps, one watches, one sharpens blades. Repeat. It wasn't always friendly. You've had bedmates try to steal from you, whisper threats in the dark, vanish with your last strip of meat. But even so, you'd take that over solitude most days, because out here, the worst company still has a heartbeat. And that heartbeat can mean the difference between hearing a wolf or not. Of course, there were exceptions. Some hunters chose solitude. You met one once, old, nearly blind in one eye, with a patchwork coat made of dog fur. He claimed voices in his head told him where to set traps. Swore he hadn't spoken to another soul in 4 winters. His camp was terrifying, perfectly clean, organised, quiet as a church. He looked at you like you were interrupting a conversation he was already having with someone invisible. Fringe case, sure, but it stuck with you. Because isolation does things, cold does things. Mix the two to And you don't just get frostbite, you get thin inside, brittle, unstable. There's some debate among medieval scholars about how organised these hunter bands really were. Some think they were little more than informal friend groups. Others believe there were entire hierarchies, ranks, rituals, even initiation rites, like a forest guild. One traveller's journal from the 1300s describes a group of ice brothers in the Pyrenees who marked their campgrounds with twisted pine branches to signal territory. Truth? Maybe. Or maybe it was just one man who liked dramatic stories. Either way, the principle holds. Out here in the frozen torrents, you start to miss noise, you crave conversation, not because you're bored, but because your mind fills the void with things you don't want. Imagined whispers, crunches that might be nothing or somethings. You've started talking to yourself again. That's how you know it's getting to you, not loud, just little mutters. Trap's gone, you say to the trees. Or, too much snow for a good print. It helps, anchors you. Still you long for a voice that isn't your own. For another pair of boots crunching nearby. For someone to laugh when you sit in a patch of snow by accident and mutter curses through chattering teeth. For now you have the forest. And the wind. And your thoughts. Too many of those. You reach your last snare. Success. A plump hare frozen stiff, its eyes already glazed, and fur dusted with frost. You lift it with a quiet grunt and whisper, "Sorry, friend," before tucking it into your satchel. Then you head back toward camp. Alone. Again, but still alive. By the time you trudge back into camp with the frozen hare in your pack, the sky's taken on that dull leaden tone that means snow is coming, not soon, but eventually. It's the kind of sky that hangs overhead like a warning, low and full, too heavy to be trusted. You know it well. You've seen it roll in before, sometimes for days before anything falls, but when it does, it's like this world holds its breath and then exhales 6 feet of silence all at once. So you move faster. First, you gut the hare. Quick, efficient, just off to the side of camp, away from where you sleep. You bury the innards under a foot of snow, not because it's respectful, but because you'd rather not wake up to a fox rummaging through your bedding. Then you string up the carcass by its hind legs and hang it near the deer remains, both now frozen stiff as planks. They'll keep for days, even weeks in this weather, as long as scavengers don't get to them first. But you've got something else on your mind today. Not food, not traps, not even snow. It's protection. Because tonight's the kind of night where cold isn't the only thing that wants you dead. You kneel in the centre of your camp and begin your routine. First, you rub ashes from last night's fire along the rim of your boots, then down the edge of your sleeves. You do it every night, out of habit, yes, but also something more. Call it tradition, call it superstition, call it what it is, an old oath you barely understand anymore. You were initiated into the hunt like most, blooded at 16, handed a bow with a cracked grip and told not to come back until you'd killed something that couldn't speak. A rabbit, a stag, a wolf, didn't matter, as long as it bled, as long as it died. The man who gave you that oath was older than cold, face like boiled leather. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened. You sleep with your back to bark, he told you once, or the spirits will crawl in through your spine. You didn't ask questions, just nodded, and tied a strip of deer sinew around your wrist, like the others. Left it there until it rotted off. That's what the oath said. Now, alone in your camp, you keep the ritual alive, not because you think spirits are watching, but because it's comforting to act like they are. You scrape a ring in the snow around your sleeping area, a thin trench, a ward, then you stick pine needles into it, pointing outward like little daggers. Nothing fancy, just enough to feel like you're doing something. That's how hunters dealt with fear. Not by ignoring it, by turning it into routine. You've heard the stories, everyone has. Hunters who vanish on nights like this. No tracks, no struggle, just bedding left behind, still warm, cloaks neatly folded. Like they stood up and walked into the woods without thinking. Some say it's exhaustion, exposure, madness. Others whisper about things in the trees, old things that like to collect the lonely. So you do the rituals, you draw the signs, you mutter the old phrases. Cold with each shadow, wind with each breath, I deny thee. Just words, but sometimes words are walls, and you're not alone in this. Medieval hunters were some of the most superstitious people on earth, and for good reason. When you live in the dark, you learn to respect it. The woods are old, older than villages, older than kings, and people knew that. They made oaths, shared little rites. Even the most hardened, grizzled hunter would spit 3 times over a kill's blood if it died facing north. Not because it made sense, because it was known, and known things feel safer than unknown ones. There's a fringe belief mentioned in a few old folk texts that some hunting parties had designated oath keepers, men who didn't hunt, didn't cook, didn't trap. Their job was to remember the chants, the signs, the old protections passed down orally across generations, human archives basically. Some scholars think that's where the first wandering priests came from. Not temples, but forests. Not sermons, but safeguards. You like that idea? That even in the coldest, loneliest places, someone was remembering for you. Tonight you remember for yourself. You finish your circle of pine needles and lay your knife beside your bedding, not under it. Under is bad luck. Another old rule, you hang the hair high out of reach. Then you pull out the last of your deer tallow and smear a bit across your forehead. For warmth, technically. But really, it's just part of the process now, something to focus on, a ritual in grease. And then finally you sit. The fire's down to coals. You don't feed it. You need the light low. You don't want to draw attention. You don't want to send out the signal that something warm and full of meat is here, huddled under hides and whispering to itself. Instead, you settle into your bedding, cloak pulled tight, face wrapped, hands tucked under your armpits. You breathe, you wait, and as you begin to drift, not to sleep but to that halfway state where thought and dream blend, you whisper the words again. Cold without shadow, wind without breath, I deny thee. Do you believe them? Doesn't matter. They believe in you. You wake to the smell before the cold, a greasy animal stench, thick in the air like someone lit a candle made from wet fur. It clings to your throat, seeps into your nostrils, makes your stomach twist even before your eyes open. And when they do, it's worse, because something's been here. Your camp is still intact, mostly. Your bedding hasn't been disturbed, your fire pit still holds the faint glow of old coals, and the hair you hung last night is gone. Not ripped down, not torn or dragged, just gone, clean, horned. You sit up slowly, cloak slipping off your shoulders, every muscle tight. The air is still, the trees hushed, as if they too are waiting. You scan for prints, marks, disturbances in the snow, and that's when you see it. A smudge, not quite a footprint, not quite a drag, just an indentation in the snow near the edge of your bedding. It's almost hand-shaped, but too long. 5 marks, narrow, no claws. You blink, rub your face, look again, gone. Maybe it was never there, but the smell still is. That's when you realise you forgot the bear fat. Last night, in all your rituals and oaths and pine needle circles, you left out the single most disgusting, most effective cold weather survival tactic known to medieval man, the bear fat blanket hack. You reach for the bundle at the edge of your gear, half melted, wrapped in bark, oozing slightly through a layer of oiled cloth. It's the colour of candle wax left out too long and smells like a slaughterhouse after a thunderstorm. Rancid, tangy, intense in a way that seems to bypass your nose and go straight to your brain. But you need it, because no matter how warm your bedding, no matter how thick your hides, there comes a point when your body can't fight the cold from the inside anymore. You have to fight it from the outside in. You smear it across your arms first, forearms, elbows, shoulders, then your thighs, calves, chest. You leave your face alone, no need to go full bare. But everything else, slathered, layered, marinated in stink, and instantly you're warmer. It's not even subtle. The fat acts like a barrier, seals your skin from the air, holds in what little heat your body produces. It's disgusting, it's sticky. You feel like a roast waiting for the fire. But it works, and that's what matters. You lie back down, cloak wrapped tight, and think about how many other hunters you've seen do this. Most pretend it's a last resort. Some brag like it's a badge of honour, but everyone uses it. Eventually. In the far north, they swear by it. Bear fat, wolf fat, even rendered badger grease if that's all they've got. You once met a trapper who smeared himself with a mix of lard and crushed juniper berries. Said it kept the smell down and the spirits out. Another swore by mixing bear grease with beeswax. Said it made a natural armour against the wind. A third claimed to sleep naked in it, said wrapped in a single fur like some cursed newborn. That man lost all the hair on his legs and still insisted it was worth it. The science, if you can call it that, is simple. Animal fat is dense, slow to freeze, slow to melt. It repels moisture, insulates skin, and traps body heat better than almost anything else found in the medieval toolkit. Some even used it as a fire starter, not just for themselves, but to smear on logs so flames could take hold more easily in wet weather. But out here, it's the survival equivalent of a thermal force field. And that's why, for all its wretched smell and squishy texture, the bear fat hack was a treasured, if grimy, part of the winter hunter's arsenal. You glance back at your gear. Still there, knife, pouch, bow, bedding, but the feeling from earlier still lingers, like someone passed through your camp, examined your setup, and chose to leave without a trace. A test, maybe. A warning. The stories come back again. The ones about things in the forest that don't leave tracks. That don't howl or growl or make noise, but just exist, cold as the air, invisible until they're too close. You used to laugh at them. Now, you still laugh, but more softly, less certain. You settle into your bedding again, this time wrapped in the oily warmth of bear fat and wool, and stare at the branches above you. The sky's turning that same low grey as yesterday, heavy, watching, but you're ready now, covered, insulated, unappealing, because if the cold comes for you again tonight, it's going to have to peel through a half-inch of rendered bare and your own unwashed stubbornness to do it. Some fringe hunters claimed the smell alone kept spirits away, that the stink of rotten beast confused anything unnatural that might be sniffing around. It's possible, or maybe it just repels wolves and keeps humans from wanting your campfire. Whatever the reason, you feel safer, like an animal marked with its own scent, territorial, unapproachable, which is funny considering how vulnerable you still are, lying there under the branches, half asleep, stinking of grease and surrounded by snow and silence. But you survived the night before. You'll survive this one too, and when the cold comes whispering past your camp, looking for warm skin to steal, it'll take one whiff of you and think, nope, not tonight. You don't notice it at first, just a slight dampness under your left thigh, then a chill, a whisper of cold that slips past the bear grease and the wool and settles in your bones like a quiet insult. You shift, annoyed, and that's when you feel it fully. Wet. Not snow, not sweat, just wet. It takes about 3 seconds for your mind to connect the dots. The melted snow from yesterday, the forgotten splash of spilled water near your bedding, the deer carcass thawing just slightly in the false warmth of the sun before freezing again at dusk. You didn't think it would reach your sleeping area. It did. It always does. You peel back your cloak and are bedding in a panic, heart climbing into your throat. The sheepskin is soaked through at one edge. The wool beneath it, matted, down, damp, sticky with half-frozen grease, is worse. And your underlayers, cold, clammy, the kind of damp that doesn't feel like it's sitting on top of you, but inside you. This is how it starts. You strip off the wet layers fast. Tunic first, then the second tunic underneath, then your wool chausses down to the knees. You're half naked in the snow now, steaming like a wounded beast, and moving faster than you have in days. Your teeth start to chatter, not from the air yet, but from your own body realizing it's lost heat and is about to go into emergency mode. You toss the wet gear toward the fire pit, snatch up the last of your dry cloth, a thin linen shirt barely warm enough to be underwear, and pull it on. Then your driest cloak, your extra scarf, your socks on your hands because your mittens are wet too. You're wrapping yourself like a mummy, layering what little you have, hoping to stop the shivering before it turns violent. And all the while, one phrase spins in your head like a prayer: when wet equals dead. And that's not just a hunter's saying, it's law out here. If your gear gets wet and you don't fix it fast, your body will shut down. Doesn't matter how strong you are. Doesn't matter how clever. The cold doesn't care. It begins with numbness. You'll feel your hands go first, then your feet. Your skin will tighten, joints lock. Your breath becomes shallow, like you're trying not to disturb the air. Then comes the shaking, hard, uncontrollable. That's your body begging you to move. And if you don't listen, you stop shaking. That's the real danger. When the cold goes quiet, when your body gives up and says, okay, I guess this is how it ends. You've seen it before. One winter, years ago, a younger hunter, green as spring moss, fell into a shallow stream while checking a trap, laughed it off, said it didn't even reach his knees. He didn't change, didn't dry out, just kept moving. 6 hours later, you found him under a pine tree, blue as twilight, hands curled into claws. His boots were still damp when you buried him. You won't let that happen now. You dig out your flint and striker, blow on the fading coals, and start building the fire back up. Carefully, desperately. You break off branches with shaking hands, feeding them into the flame like they're confessions. The smoke claws at your eyes, the sparks dance too close, but you don't care, you need this fire. When it catches, truly catches, you almost cry. The heat hits you like a slap, sudden and brutal. Your skin steams, your breath curls sideways. You strip off the linen shirt again, holding it close to the flame, rotating it, careful not to scorch. The same with your tunics, your mittens, your sheepskin. You dry them all one by one, even though it'll take hours. You don't move far, you can't move far. Every step from this fire feels like a step toward the grave. Some hunters swore by drying racks, little wooden frames built over coals, angled so the smoke curled gently upward. You don't have time for that. You'd improvise. Hang the clothes from a forked branch, prop it with a rock, rotate it every few minutes. You set your boots upside down over the heat, watching droplets hiss out from the seams. It's slow, maddening work, but it's life-saving. There's a strange comfort in the routine, the smell of smoke, the hiss of moisture burning off, the feel of hot wool brushing against your skin as you test for dryness. You remember the old rhyme from some forgotten tavern? Keep your gear dry and your belly fed, or the frost will feast on you instead. It's not poetic, but it's accurate. Somewhere in the distance a crow calls, not the sharp call of warning, just a lazy complaint. Still, it makes you glance around. The fire's visible now. You've broken your no-flame rule, but survival trumps stealth tonight. If something's watching, you'll deal with it. With a knife, or with fire. There's scholarly debate about just how seriously medieval hunters treated moisture. Some claim the dangers are overblown in modern retellings, that people just got used to it. But the evidence, it's in the language. The old songs, the prayers, the advice passed from hunter to apprentice. So much of it is about dryness, warmth, the desperate, maddening pursuit of not being wet in a world where everything wants you to be. And that's not just about comfort. It's about control. Because when your clothes are wet, they betray you. They freeze in stiff folds. They chafe. They trap cold against your skin like a jealous lover. And in the middle of the night, when the fire's low and the wind shifts, they finish you. But you're lucky. Not just because you caught it early, but because you've seen worse. You know what to do, and you're stubborn enough to do it. By the time the sun is peeking through the trees again, you're dry. You're wrapped in warm, smoke-scented layers. And though your hands still ache, and your toes are a little purple at the edges, you're here, still standing. You feed one last log into the fire and sit here, watching the steam rise from your boots like ghosts slipping into the air. Then you whisper, not quite a prayer, not quite a joke, not today. Because wet might equal dead out here, but not you, not yet. By the time the fire dies down to a quiet bed of glowing orange coals, your clothes are dry again. Mostly. Not crisp, not cozy, but functional. You smell like smoke, sweat, and very faintly of singed bear grease, which is either a deterrent or a declaration of war depending on what catches your scent first. You sit with your back against a tree, knees drawn up, cloak wrapped tight, and feel the weight of the near disaster settle into your bones. That could have gone bad, fast. You should rest. You should conserve energy. Instead, you start digging. Not deep, just enough. You take a flat stone and scrape at the frozen earth. Clearing the snow down to the crusted soil. You choose a spot not far from your bedding, but shielded, wedged between two tree roots, where the wind rarely touches. It takes time. Your fingers protest every movement. But eventually you have a shallow depression, maybe a foot deep, ringed with small stones you scavenge from beneath the snow. This is your next trick. A smokeless fire. It sounds like a contradiction, right? Fire, by its very nature, smokes, especially when you're stuck using damp wood or green branches. But medieval hunters knew a thing or two about stealth. And sometimes you needed heat without the beacon of light and smoke that came with it. So they got clever. You build it like a sandwich. First, you lay down a bed of dry moss, thin, brittle stuff you kept tucked inside your pack for this exact moment. Over that, you place flat coals from your dying fire, carefully lifted with a stick. Then twigs, then more moss, then dirt. Yeah, dirt. You cover it loosely, just enough to hide the flame but not snuff it entirely. Then you punch tiny holes with a stick on one side, air vents. On the opposite side, you dig a narrow tunnel to let heat vent out. What you've made, in essence, is a primitive Dakota fire hole. The medieval version. A heat trap. Low flame, no smoke. All business. You crouch over it now, palms open. The heat that seeps out is subtle but direct, rising in a narrow column. It doesn't spread, doesn't waste, it just rises, focused and controlled. You tuck your hands close and let it do its quiet work. You remember the first time you saw one of these. You were still a kid, tagging along with your uncle, a gruff, quiet man who preferred traps to conversation. He crouched over this odd little pit, feeding it twigs the size of your fingers, and told you, "This here's the fire that doesn't talk." You didn't get it then. You do now. In a world where light attracts teeth, a silent fire is the closest thing to kindness you'll ever find. There are scattered mentions of smokeless fires in old hunting texts and monastic field guides. Cryptic little notes about the coal bed that warms but does not betray. Some describe burying embers in sand and lying atop them on deer hides. Others recommend keeping the venting tunnel aimed away from the wind, so the scent of burning wood doesn't carry far. A few even go as far as sleeping on top of a fire pit like this, with layers of bark and hide in between. Letting the heat rise slowly through the night. It sounds mad, until it works. You add another twig, rotate your hands. The cold that's been eating at your joints all day begins to retreat, grudgingly but noticeably. It's not comfort, it's maintenance. And that's what most people misunderstand about fire in the wilderness. They think it's about warmth, light, roaring flames and cooked meat. It's not. Out here, fire is a tool, not a spectacle. You keep it low because anything higher draws attention. You feed it slowly because you never know when you'll find dry wood again. And you never build a fire in the open unless you're either incredibly confident or incredibly stupid. Still, there are risks, even with a smokeless fire. You've heard stories, everyone has. One about a hunter who built his fire too deep, too narrow. The coals burned low into the earth. He fell asleep on top of it, thinking the hide barrier would be enough. It wasn't. Woke up with blisters down the length of his spine, the fur fused to his skin. Another story, less tragic, more bizarre, about a man who swore his buried fire attracted something. Said he woke up with frost on his eyelashes and a single bare footprint in the snow by the vent. Human, but upside down. You don't believe that one. Mostly. You check the fire again, still low, still quiet, a miracle in heat form. You shift your boots closer, careful not to collapse the tunnel, and let the warmth creep up your legs. You know some hunters used animal bones instead of stones to line their pits. Said they held heat better. Others lined the pit with a layer of ash to reduce smoke even more. There were all kinds of tweaks and tricks, some legit, some probably just born out of long nights and longer stories. There's a fringe theory that monastic orders in colder regions trained their travelling scribes in smokeless fire techniques, not just to survive, but to hide. After all, parchment's useless when its carrier dies in the snow. A few old illuminated manuscripts even show tiny hooded figures crouched over what appear to be covered pits. Tendrils of smoke curling under cloaks, secretive heat. Monks with stealth, you smile at the thought. You, cloaked in your own stink, crouched over a hidden flame, are now kin to both hunter and holy man. The snow begins to fall, soft, dry flakes that vanish as soon as they meet the heat of your little fire. You tilt your head back and let one land on your lip. It melts instantly. You think about how ridiculous it is, how precious, and to catch a flake and feel something melt for once instead of freeze. And then you let yourself lean in just a little closer, because this fire won't last forever, and neither will the wood. But for now, you've got something rare, heat without danger, flame without attention, warmth that doesn't talk. The fire finally dies sometime after midnight, burns down to a whisper, then a memory, and then nothing. No smoke, no steer, just a patch of warm dirt giving off the faintest heat like an old breath. You lie back, your body stiff and lined with tension, staring up at the stars winking behind thin branches. You want to close your eyes, but not yet. Not your turn, because tonight you're on watch. It's something medieval hunting parties understood better than anyone. You don't all sleep at once. That's not survival. That's bait. You sleep in shifts, short ones, timed to the wind and the darkness and the sound of things breathing beyond the trees. Tonight, there's no one to trade off with, so your shift is all night, or as long as your eyes will stay open. You sit upright, back against the same tree you always pick when you're alone. It leans slightly. enough to give your spine support, but not so much it'll let you drift. You place your bow across your knees, half out of comfort, half out of habit. The string's been slack for hours to keep it from freezing tight, but your fingers still hover near it just in case. The forest is never silent. That's what most people get wrong. They think it's peaceful out here. They imagine wind in the trees, maybe an owl, maybe the crunch of a mouse, but they forget the throat of the forest. The deep, low rumble of it just existing. Trees creaking, ice settling, snow sighing as it shifts. The constant, quiet threat of life, and not the kind you want close. You've heard it all. Wolves in the distance howling like they've just remembered something tragic. Wild dogs barking in the dark, boars crashing through the brush like barrels rolling downhill. One time a bear made a noise so low and so close that you didn't move for hours. Just sat there, cloak over your head, heart pounding like war drums, praying the fire didn't crackle. But sometimes it's not the big things that scare you. It's the little ones. Twigs snapping where they shouldn't, leaves rustling when there's no wind, the sudden hush of birds going silent all at once. You hear something now, crunch, 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 slow, deliberate. Coming from the east, you freeze. Not deer. Deer are lighter. They move in bursts. Nervous, bounding, sharp, not a fox either. Too slow, and it's not the wind. You know the rhythm of wind. This has pace, and wherever it is, it's walking. On 4 legs, maybe 2. You don't move, don't breathe, just listen. Then, as suddenly as it came, it stops. Nothing. No retreat. No final crack of a twig. Just gone. You sit like that for 15 minutes, maybe more. You lose track. Time stretches out into threadbare lines. The fire's long gone. The cold creeps back in through your soles, your sleeves, the gap between your hood and your scarf. You wait. Eventually your body protests. You shift your weight, flex your fingers, stamp your feet slowly, quietly. You know the rules. When you're on watch, your job isn't to see. It's to stay alive. You don't chase sounds. You don't investigate whispers. You just make sure you're still breathing when the sun comes up. Most medieval hunters knew this intimately. Watch rotation wasn't just for military camps or caravans. It was common in any group travelling through the woods. 1 awake, 2 asleep, or 2 awake if there were threats nearby, wolves, bandits, worse. And if you were the unlucky one with the first or last shift, you didn't complain. Because that meant you were trusted. Of course, when you're alone, there's no one to trust but yourself. So you adapt, you develop micronaps. 10-second shutdowns where your eyes close but your ears stay sharp. Some old hunters swore by it. Said you could train yourself to nap in 10-minute bursts and never lose awareness. You've tried. Not mastered it, but you're getting close. There's a trick where you tie a small rock to your hand, just heavy enough to drop when your muscles relax. Fall asleep, the rock falls, hits the ground, wakes you up. Primitive alarm clock. Some people use knives. You tried that once, or... You think about Marek again, your old trail partner. He was a light sleeper, the kind who could wake up if you looked at him too hard. But he still insisted on taking the middle shift. It's the witching hour, he said once, grin half hidden by his beard. When the dead walk, the wolves hunt, and the snow listens. You used to roll your eyes. Then you spent a few winters alone. Now you don't roll your eyes at anything. There's a fringe theory, buried deep in the stranger corners of a medieval writing, that watch rotations weren't just practical, but spiritual. That sleeping all the way through the night left you vulnerable to what one monk called the unseen obligations of darkness. So they stayed awake, kept fire, told stories in whispers. One scribe even suggested that the practice was tied to ancient rites, older than Christendom, older than empire, meant to keep the world from forgetting you in your sleep. Like you had to prove you were still alive by watching the darkness back. You shift again, the cold's climbed into your cloak now, tight and nagging. You whisper, not to yourself but to the trees. I'm still here. Not a prayer, not a boast, just a fact. It doesn't warm you, but it settles you. The stars shift. A little, not much. Time's moving again, you feel the weight of the night in your chest. Heavy, but no longer unbearable. The worst of the cold is past. The fire's memory lingers in your limbs. You made it through this hour. You'll make it through the next. You settle in, the forest breathes, and you keep watch. Sometime just before dawn, when the forest's breath is slowest and even the wind seems to hesitate, you reach for your pouch and pull out what's left of your rations. Not much. A fist-sized lump of hard cheese, a strip of smoked venison tougher than boot leather. And, saving grace, there's a sliver of honeycomb wrapped in wax bark. You chew slowly, jaw aching, each bite deliberate and mechanical, like stoking a dying fire with splinters. It's not indulgence. It's not even hunger. It's strategy. This is your mid-sleep meal. And in the medieval wilds, it's not just a weird habit. It's survival science. You lean back against the tree, food warming in your stomach, and let your thoughts drift with the rising steam from your breath. Out here, no one tells you to eat in the middle of the night. No cook claps his hands and calls you to table. You learn it the hard way. You wake up cold enough times, and eventually you realize it's not always your cloak or your bedding that's failing, it's your body's fuel. The body is a fire. A slow one, yes, but just as needy. Feed it too little and it turns inward, starts pulling from muscle, from fat, from your ability to think. Feed it just enough at just the right moment and it keeps burning quietly through the night, turning heat inward while everything else freezes around you. You learned it from an old woman in the market once, long before you ever came to these woods. She sold dried beans and birch bark bread and carried herself like someone who'd walked more nights than you'd had hot meals. She said, "Eat in the middle of the night if you want to wake up. Doesn't have to be much, just to remind your belly it's alive." And then she handed you a ball of honey and lard wrapped in flax cloth, said, "Try this when the wind screams." She wasn't wrong. That's why you keep a little food tucked within reach of your bedding, always, even when supplies are low, especially then, something dense, something rich, something your stomach can turn into heat. Tonight it's the honeycomb. You bite into it carefully, teeth grinding through wax and sweet. The sugar hits your bloodstream almost instantly. A warmth blooms in your chest, bombage, not fire, but flicker, like a coal catching at the bottom of a flue. And while you eat, the rest of your body pays attention. Fingers unclench, toes twitch, the trembling in your shoulders fades, replaced with the kind of stillness that isn't weakness, but stability. You add a sip of warm water from the bladder near your fire pit, still faintly heated from the coals beneath it, and it makes the honey settle even deeper. You don't smile, but the tension behind your eyes loosens just a bit. You've done this long enough to know which foods serve which purpose. Fats, like bear grease or cold-cured pork belly, burn slow, perfect before sleep. Proteins, like jerky or dried fish, take longer to digest but stick with you. And sugar? Sugar is the emergency flare. Quick, bright, gone. There's debate among modern scholars about whether medieval people truly understood the metabolic mechanics of food and warmth. Some say it was all guesswork, ritual, tradition, passed down myth. But the consistency of the habits, the patterns across regions and languages, suggests something more. People knew. They may not have had the terms for caloric density or glucose spikes, but they knew that eating right before or during the coldest hours mattered. Travellers and hunters alike described night meals as essential, not for satiety, but for survival. And it wasn't just about the physical. There's something comforting about eating in the dark, about reminding your body that there is still sweetness, still sustenance, even while the forest is asleep. It cuts through the panic, the creeping edges of despair that come when the fire dies and the frost creeps close. You've heard stories, likely true, of hunting parties waking each other with mouthfuls of dried bread soaked in rendered fat. No words, just a hand, a bite, a nod, and then back to bed with a little more heat in the gut and a little more hope in the spine. In colder places, Scandinavia, the High Carpathians, the wind-torn plateaus of Scotland, they swore by midnight meat. Small rich meals shared around a whispering fire. No songs, just chewing, slowly, together. You remember a night like that yourself, deep winter. 6 of you huddled beneath a tarp strung between 2 dead trees. Fire so low it barely cast a shadow. One man passed a pouch of dried duck, another a chunk of rancid butter wrapped in linen. You all took bites in silence, passed it along, and returned to your shivering beds with grease on your lips and silence in your bones. No one froze that night. Not one. You finish your food and wipe your hands on the edge of your cloak, the wax from the honeycomb leaving a faint sheen on your fingertips. Sticky, but warm. You tuck the remains back into your pouch, 2 bites left, enough for tomorrow, and settle again against the tree. The cold isn't gone, of course. It never is. But now it feels muted, manageable. The stars are fading. The edge of the sky lightens just enough to suggest a sun somewhere behind all that grey. And as the forest begins to stir, the barest rustle. The groan of a tree trunk shifting in the frost, you feel ready again. Not just because of your fire, not just because of your bedding or your bear fat or your pine needle ritual, but because you remembered to feed the fire inside. You close your eyes for just a moment and listen. Not to the wind, not to the wolves, but to your own body, quietly burning, saying, "I'm still here." The first thing you feel when you wake is pain. Not the sharp kind, not the kind that screams and demands immediate attention. No, this is the dull, pulsing ache of a body that's been locked in the same position too long, in temperatures too low, on bedding that cares nothing for your comfort. Your joints resist movement. Your spine feels like someone poured cold iron into it. But worst of all are your hands. You peel one from beneath your armpit and examine it in the grey pre-dawn light. The skin is blotchy, pale. The fingertips are hard, waxy to the touch. You try to bend your fingers into a fist. Two respond, the rest move like frozen sticks. You blow on them, nothing. You press them against your stomach into the warmth trapped beneath your layers. Still nothing. You don't panic. You've felt this before, and panic makes it worse. You've entered what old hunters called the freeze line, that narrow, terrifying place between numbness and frostbite. Some called it the white time, others just the edge. It's the stage where your body isn't just cold, it's giving up. Retreating from its outermost positions, fingers, toes, so it can protect the vital places. Heart, lungs, brain. You sit up slowly, gritting your teeth as your knees crack and pop. You unwrap your scarf just enough to press your frozen hands directly against your bare chest, beneath the innermost shirt. The shock of it almost knocks the wind out of you. Your whole body tenses involuntarily. But that's the point. You need to wake it up. This is where the fight begins, not against wolves, not against hunger, but against your own flesh. You begin to rock side to side, back and forth, rubbing your hands against your skin in slow, focused circles. Then you slap them together. Once, twice, 5 times. The sound is muffled by the snow, but it stings enough to help. The tingling comes next, tiny pinpricks, like ants marching through your veins. It's a good sign. Pain means life. Pain means circulation. But if you feel nothing, if the waxy look turns grey, then black, that's when you start counting fingers and wondering how many you'll keep. You've seen it before, too many times. A hunter on his second day out, hands wrapped too tightly, too late, lost the tips of 2 fingers before he even realised they'd gone. Another froze a toe off in his boot and didn't notice until it made a sound like wood snapping when he stumbled. You remember the look in his eyes, like he was watching someone else's body fall apart. There are remedies, of course. Or there were. You've heard of paste made from crushed juniper bark and rabbit fat, rubbed into the skin to draw the cold out. Others swore by hot stones pressed under the armpits and groin, areas thick with blood vessels. One lunatic you knew dunked his hands in snow before warming them, claiming it sealed the damage. It didn't. His pinkies turned black anyway. The truth is, once frostbite sets in, there's not much to do but wait and pray. Pray it stops at the skin. Pray it doesn't reach the bone. You keep working. 15 minutes pass, maybe more, before your fingers twitch properly. A spark of pain in the knuckles, then the pads. Then, finally, the thumb bends without resistance. You flex your hand, still stiff, still aching, but alive, and that is everything. You feel your eyes sting, just for a moment. Not tears, exactly, just the heat returning too fast. Or maybe it's frustration. You do everything right, and still, the cold wins something. A toe, a fingertip, a little piece of you each time, but you get it back, or most of it. Your boots are stiff when you force your feet into them. The leather has frozen into the exact shape of yesterday's pain. You stamp lightly, wince, then harder. Your toes tingle, not in a good way, but not dead either. You'll take it. You pull your gloves on, still slightly damp from yesterday, and make a mental note. You need dry fuel, you need to move, and you need circulation. Now, this is the part people don't see, the work of staying alive. They think it's about shelter, about hunting. But sometimes the hardest task is just moving your own blood where it's supposed to be. You start with a walk around camp, slow, methodical, stomping like a man possessed. Arms swinging, hips rotating. Every step a declaration. I am not freezing to death today. Somewhere nearby, a branch snaps. You ignore it. Cold first, everything else later. You open and close your fists 100 times. You breathe deep. You stretch clumsily, like a man trying to remember how his body fits together. And it works. Bit by bit, the cold pulls back. Not completely, but enough. You gather wood next. Birch bark, dry, papery, scraped from a half-fallen trunk, a few finger-sized sticks, a frozen log you'll prop near the fire to thaw. Movement is warmth, warmth is life. There's debate among scholars about how medieval people treated frostbite. Some say they didn't even recognise it as a condition, just lumped it in with curses or winter's rot. Others claim there were folk cures passed through villages, whispered like secrets. But the hunters, the ones out here, they didn't need names for it, they knew it. And they knew what to do. Keep moving, keep eating, keep warming. You kneel near the ashes of your smokeless fire, dig a shallow pit again and rebuild the flame from memory. This time you add extra kindling. This time you're not subtle. Let it smoke. Let it burn. Let the world know you're still here. When the fire catches, you stretch your hands toward it. Not too close, not too fast, just enough. The feeling is terrible. The nerves scream, like waking a sleeping army with a hammer. But you welcome the pain, you need the pain. You're alive, you've got all 10 fingers. And for one more day you've won. You've never been one for superstition. You don't tie feathers to your bow or whisper to the trees or avoid stepping over animal bones. You don't mark your face with ash or leave offerings in tree hollows. Not because you think it's foolish, but because if you started, you're not sure you'd know when to stop. Out here, belief can grow like mould in the damp corners of your mind, spreading silently until it's everywhere, until it owns you. And lately, you've been hearing things, not voices, not whispers, breath. You'll be sitting still, fire dying low, wrapped in your furs, your eyes half closed, and you'll hear it, not your own, not the wind, just breath. Close by, rhythmic, human, slow, and then it stops. You've checked a dozen times. No tracks, no heat prints, no signs of anything moving through camp. But it happens again. Same pattern, same spot, always at night, always when you're just warm enough to stop paying attention. So you sit now, staring into the trees, refusing to blink, refusing to let the cold lull you into that false calm again. The snow's thickening, falling in lazy, silent flakes that seem to drift sideways more than down. You wrap your scarf tighter, heart steady, ears tuned to the silence behind the silence. And there it is, that exhale, long, soft, close, and then nothing. You squeeze your eyes shut for a second and force a laugh, but it's weak. You've been out here too long, that's what it is. The isolation, the cold, the waking in the middle of the night with your own breath fogging your face. It messes with you. Everyone knows that. Medieval hunters didn't just fear wolves and starvation, they feared the loneliness. There's an old belief, half folk tale, half warning, that too much time in the snow alone will white your thoughts. That's the phrase they used. Whiten them, like a blizzard scouring everything clean, including your sense of what's real. Hunters spoke of men who returned from solo trips unable to speak, just sat in corners, eyes glassy, whispering to the snow stuck in their beards. You think about that a lot now, because you're still yourself, you're still rational. You can dress your own wounds, boil snow for water, build a fire with one hand if you have to. You're fine, except that breath wasn't yours, and you still can't explain it. You shift in your bedding, push your back up against the tree trunk, and keep your knife unsheathed across your lap. Not because you expect to use it, but because it helps you feel here, now, real. In medieval Europe, people didn't separate the physical and the spiritual the way we try to. They didn't have the luxury. A shiver could mean a ghost. A strange breeze could mean a curse. And deep in the woods, where no church bells rang, where no priest would wander, people made their own rules. One of those rules, don't talk to the snow, simple enough, but everyone knew someone who broke it. There's a story about a man in Bohemia, hunter, trapper, quiet as moss, who wandered alone too long one winter. He came back laughing, not mad, not sad, just laughing. Said he'd met something in the woods, that it lived in the silence and breathed where men sleep. He described it as tall, pale, human-shaped but not human-faced. It never spoke. It just watched, and sometimes breathed. When asked what it wanted, he said, "Nothing, just for you to know it's there." You'd be surprised how often those stories show up, across cultures, across time. Sometimes it's a white woman, sometimes a faceless man, sometimes just breathing in the dark, always alone, always in winter. The theories vary. Some say it's a projection of your own thoughts, a kind of psychological defense mechanism that manifests a presence so you don't go insane from solitude. Others say it's spiritual, that the cold somehow gathers itself, observes, selects. You don't know what to believe, but tonight you repeat the old words anyway, not out loud, just under your breath, the way you'd mutter a memory. I am not alone. I do not speak to what listens. I do not listen to what breathes. I am not alone. You've only heard the full version once, from a half-mad hunter who slept inside a circle of carved stones and refused to turn his back on the wind. He said the snow could hear if you cursed it, said you had to acknowledge it but not invite it, and so you do quietly, with a kind of reverence that doesn't ask for belief, just respect. Then you get up, because sometimes the only answer is movement. You stomp a ring around your camp, crunching new snow underfoot, letting the noise drive out the silence. You hum, not a song, just a vibration in your throat to remind yourself that you exist. You add wood to the fire, not because it's needed, but because the light helps. You eat something. Doesn't matter what, just chewing keeps the mind anchored. Then you sit again, hands tight around your knees, staring out at the woods with sharp eyes. Eventually the breath doesn't return. Maybe it was never there. Or maybe it knows you've noticed. Either way, it's gone for now. And if it ever comes back, you won't speak, you won't listen. You'll sit in the dark, warmed by fire and stubbornness and a spine full of bad sleep and older fears, and you'll say nothing, because you are not alone. And out here, that's not always a comfort. The snow finally stops sometime after midday, as if the sky just gave up. One moment it's a flurry of flakes drifting sideways, relentless and silent. The next, nothing. Just cold light filtering through the trees and the eerie stillness that always follows a long fall of snow. The air feels cleaner somehow, heavier too, like it's pressing down on everything. You stretch your arms and roll your shoulders, every joint creaking like an old ship, and glance down at your cloak. It's frosted over again. So are your boots, so is everything. You brush yourself off slowly and take stock. The fire's dead, just a few stubborn coals buried in the snow-packed pit. Your gut sack sleeping roll is stiff and crusted at the seams. Even the spruce bedding has frozen in place, crinkling when you shift. But most of all, you notice the way your cloak feels on your shoulders, more like a wall than a blanket. Too heavy, too stiff. It's done its job, but barely, which means it's time to upgrade. You stand, legs shaky at first, and look up into the trees. The canopy's thick here, but not so much that the wind can't cut through. You need to build something better, something smarter. You need to turn what little you have into something more than a blanket. You need your cloak to become your tent. Now, this isn't some clever metaphor. It's not a romantic idea about wrapping yourself in the past or sheltering under tradition. No, this is practical. Medieval cloaks, especially those made for travellers, hunters, or soldiers, were designed for this. Not fashion, not status, but survival. You pull yours off now and shake it loose. It's heavy wool, woven tight, rough to the touch, and slightly greasy from months of smoke and bear fat. It smells like your life. You lay it out in the snow, folding it lengthwise to check the seams. The edges are intact. The neck clasp is strong. Good. The key here is structure. Without poles or canvas, you have to trick the wind into staying out. So you find two nearby saplings, bent, flexible, and lash their tops together with a strip of hide from your gear. You bend them into a low arch, driving the ends into the snow-packed earth like stakes. Then you drape the cloak over the top, pinning the sides down with stones and snow. It's crude, low to the ground. You have to crawl inside it like an animal. But once you're in, oh, it's everything. It's not warm exactly, but it's shielded. The wool holds the air still, blocks the wind, muffles the sound of your own breathing. It becomes its own little world inside the white. You can feel your body heat bouncing back at you. Trapped. Collect. This was a known trick, especially in the north. Hunters and scouts would carry cloaks long and wide enough to be used as lean-tos, half-tents, or even bivouac sacks in a pinch. Some had grommets or loops sewn into the corners, reinforced with leather so they could be tied down quickly. Others were lined with fur or oiled wool, or even scraps of waxed linen stitched in like patchwork armour against the cold. You don't have all of that, but you do have the know-how. You take some of the dry moss from your pouch and tuck it along the interior edges where the wool meets the snow. Insulation. You pile spruce boughs beneath your knees, not for comfort, but to keep you off the cold floor. Then you crawl in, slowly, carefully, like you're entering a shrine. And in a way you are. Because this isn't just a cloak anymore. It's home. You stretch out inside, the ceiling just inches from your face and feel the pore space warm around you. It's not luxury. You still smell like smoke and pig and pine and God knows what else. But you're contained. You're not at the mercy of the wind anymore. You press your hands together and smile slightly, even as your nose drips from the cold. You've taken something meant for one purpose and given it another. That's how you survive out here. Not with strength, not with muscle, but with function. There's a moment of peace now. Rare. You lie there, back on the spruce bed, cloak tent wrapped around your small fire pit. Now relit and burning low. The light flickers off the wool, casting shadows that dance like stories on the fabric. You chew on a bit of dried meat, savouring the texture more than the taste, and let your thoughts drift. You remember stories of soldiers on winter marches, wrapping themselves in their cloaks and lying shoulder to shoulder under tarps of stitched wool. Some even stitched multiple cloaks together, temporary lodges shared by men too tired to speak. In some armies, it was considered a badge of wisdom to turn your cloak into shelter. It meant you weren't just enduring, you were adapting. There's debate, of course. Some historians argue cloaks were purely fashion, that nobles and knights wouldn't be caught dead crawling under their own outerwear. But those people didn't sleep in the woods. They didn't have to. The hunters, the poachers, the smugglers, those were the ones who turned clothing into architecture. You're carrying that tradition forward. You run your hand along the inside seam, checking for gaps, just one near the back where the wind's slipping in like a whisper. You plug it with a spare sock, not elegant, effective. Then you lie back and let your body relax for the first time in hours. Outside, the snow falls again. Inside, it doesn't matter, because you've got a tent made from your own cloak, a shelter born from desperation and wool and the kind of stubbornness that outlasts blizzards. You close your eyes, one hand on your chest, the other curled beneath your chin. This isn't just about staying warm anymore. It's about turning what you have into what you need. And out here, that's as close to magic as it gets. The crunch of leaves beneath you is so faint you almost don't hear it, but you feel it. Through the pine boughs under your back, through the layers of cloak wool and damp hide, it shivers into your bones like a reminder. The forest is never empty. You hold your breath. Stillness. A kind of listening for once. Not yours, not animal. It's the quiet of something waiting. You reach slowly for your knife, not out of fear, but out of habit. And habit keeps you alive. But nothing comes, no snap of twigs, no whisper of fur brushing bark, just snow falling thick and muffled, and the cloak tent pressed tight around you. You exhale through your nose and settle back in, eyes drifting to the low roof above. It's dark in here, safe mostly. And now that you're warm, truly warm, your thoughts begin to wander somewhere you hadn't expected. The ground, not the surface, not the trees, the forest floor. Because no matter how clever your cloak or how perfectly arranged your spruce boughs, you're still sleeping on dirt. Frozen dirt, in fact. Dirt filled with the roots and detritus of decades, maybe centuries. Dead leaves, broken pine needles, 1,000 lost acorns, all of it flattened beneath your weight, forming a barrier, yes, but also a bed. And that bed matters more than you'd think. Most people imagine shelter as what's above you, the tent, the roof, the stars, the boughs. But out here, the ground is the thing that kills, slowly, silent and low, saps your heat hour by hour until your bones feel carved out. So when you lie down to sleep in the wild, your first priority isn't what's overhead, it's what's underneath. You shift now, adjusting the layers of spruce and bark and hide beneath you, feeling how much give they've lost since yesterday. The branches have compressed, they don't spring anymore, and that means they're not insulating. So you crawl out of your cloak shell and begin again. The ground crunches under your knees as you scrape back the old boughs. They're still fragrant, sap clinging to your hands in sticky strings, but they're no longer useful. You toss them aside and begin gathering new ones, cutting thick branches with your belt knife and laying them in overlapping layers. This time you add dry leaves, not just for padding, for heat. It's an old trick. You scoop them up by the armful from the base of trees, where the snow hasn't reached, where the leaves stayed dry under nature's eaves. Oak if you can find it. Birch if you can't. Any broadleaf will do. They crinkle in your hands, break like thin parchment, and release a smell so earthy and alive it makes your stomach twist with nostalgia. You spread them under the spruce like mulch, building a soft, rustling cushion between you and the frozen dirt. The effect is immediate. Your knees don't ache as much, your hips don't complain when you shift, and most importantly, you know those leaves are holding pockets of warm air, your air. A mattress made by the forest. You remember a night years ago when an old woodsman you'd camped with tore open an anthill and stole its pine needle cache to use in his bedding. Said the ants know how to live warm, and he wasn't wrong. You tried it once yourself, miserable. Too many stingers, too much guilt, but you understand the principle. The forest floor stores life, even when it looks dead, even when it crunches like glass under your boots. That's why smart hunters used it. Every part. In some regions they packed moss under their cloaks to create a second skin of insulation. Others laid down bark slabs, peeled from fallen trees and layered like shingles, to reflect body heat back up into the sleeper. There were even those who swore by earth beds, shallow pits dug into the forest floor, filled with dry leaves then covered with hide and fur. You slept in the earth, not on it. Like hibernating animals, like something trying to disappear, you try it now, just a little. You press a few of the leaves against your lower back and lie down, layering your sheepskin over them. The effect is subtle but real. The heat doesn't vanish the way it used to. It lingers. There's a kind of quiet genius in this system. Primitive, yes, but refined through desperation. Modern minds might scoff, what good are leaves against the snow? But they'd be missing the point. It's not about defeating the cold, it's about slowing it, redirecting it, giving your body just enough of a head start to make it to dawn. You chew another bite of jerky and watch the snow fall through a gap in your cloak. The flakes drift sideways now, gentle, hypnotic, and suddenly you realize you're not cold, not warm, mind you, but not cold. That's a miracle, and you owe it to the forest floor. There's a fringe belief, mostly from Eastern Europe, that the forest floor holds memories, that each leaf carries a fragment of thought from the tree it fell from. Sleeping on them, some said, was like sleeping on the dreams of oaks and birches, a way to share space with the past. You've never believed that. But now, as you lie on this rustling bed of leaves and needles, wrapped in a cloak you've turned into a tent, staring out into the falling snow with hands that still ache from frost and fire, you feel something. Not magic, just gratitude. The forest gives, slowly, cautiously, but it gives, and when you sleep tonight, it won't be on the ground, it'll be with it. The wind changes. You don't see it, you feel it, like a sigh against your spine, cutting down through the tree and curling beneath your cloak as if it knows exactly where the gaps are. One moment you're stable, nested in your forest floor bedding like a stubborn little god, and the next you're shivering again, your jaw locking against the chill, your thoughts scattering like startled birds. You pull your scarf higher, press your hands into your armpits, and exhale slowly through your nose. Here it comes. It's not just cold, it's hostile now. This isn't the passive freeze you've fought for nights. This is the sky turning against you. The wind has picked up, the snow is sharp again, not flakes, but tiny shards that sting when they hit your cheeks. And the trees, they're groaning. Deep creaks and knocks like old bones shifting in the dark. This is what medieval hunters feared most. Not wolves, not starvation, the changing weather. Because no matter how well you've prepared, how deep your bedding, how clever your shelter, when the sky hates you, none of it is guaranteed to work. You huddle tighter inside your cloak tent trying to calculate your next move. The structure is low to the ground, yes, but the snow's piling fast now, a few inches in minutes. If this keeps up, you'll either be buried or exposed if the wind decides to rip your setup apart. And that wind is doing what wind does best, it's testing you. You've seen it before, that moment when the air shifts from indifferent to predatory. You can hear it roaring higher in the trees now, knocking loose snow from the upper branches in great slumping crashes that sound too close for comfort. One falls not 10 paces from your camp, sending up a spray of white like surf against rock. You clench your jaw and move, fast, no time to hesitate. You tear out from under the cloak and grab at your pack, yanking the bedding free, scattering leaves, dragging spruce boughs aside to check your supplies. You can't afford to be graceful right now. You need to reinforce. First, you bank snow onto the sides of your cloak shelter, not away from it, on top. It seems counterintuitive, maybe even stupid, but this is a trick pulled straight from the Northern Hunter's Manual. Snow insulates. Packed snow doesn't just bury you, it protects you. You pile it thick against the edges of your tent, turning it into a half-dug snow cave. Your hands burn from the cold, you don't care. Then you brace the inside with sticks, short crossbeams between the saplings that form your roof structure. You wedge them in tight, pounding them into the snow with your boot heel. The cloak is sagging slightly under the weight already, but you can't let it collapse. You won't. By the time you crawl back inside, the wind is howling full-throated. It screams through the trees like a warning, snatching at anything loose, stray cloth, hair, breath, but your shelter holds, just barely. And inside, it's quiet. Not peaceful, but muffled, like the world has stepped back, just a little, to watch. You lie there, breath fogging the tiny space, watching snowflakes drift through the narrow opening near your feet. You're back to breathing shallow again, carefully, like someone trying not to break a spell, because if that wind gets worse, it could take everything. You think about old hunters, real ones, the ones with fewer fingers and worse odds. The stories they told when the weather turned like this. Some swore the wind had a will of its own, not just what it destroyed, but who, as if it chose. There's a tale you heard once, early in your wandering years, about a man in the Tyrolean Alps who disappeared after building a snow shelter too close to a ridge. When they found what was left of it weeks later, the structure was intact, but he was gone. Just gone. No prints, no trail. Inside, a pouch of food, a warm bed, a knife in perfect condition. Nothing taken, nothing broken. The wind, they said, took him. Now logically, you know that wind doesn't carry men away. That cold doesn't have a grudge. But when you're lying inside a fragile dome of stitched wool and wet branches, and the only thing keeping you from freezing is your own stubborn refusal to stop moving, well, logic feels like a luxury. And it doesn't help that outside you can hear things moving. Not animals, just the trees, bending, breaking, whispering to each other like old men sharing secrets they'd rather not remember. You roll onto your side, pressing your knees to your chest, and try to distract yourself by counting the parts of your body that don't hurt. Left ear, cold, fingers, aching, back, stiff, toes, unknown, probably fine. Right shoulder, surprisingly okay, so one good part, not a bad score considering. You sip from your water skin, lukewarm now, but liquid, which is all that matters, and tuck your hands under your thighs. You're not warming up, but you're not losing ground either. That's all winter survival ever is, a series of battles where breaking even means you win. There's debate among historians about just how well medieval hunters handled extreme weather. Some argue they had no real strategies, just trial and error. Others insist they were walking encyclopedias of weather lore. Passed down through generations, the truth is probably both. Most people didn't write their knowledge down, but they lived it. And you're living it now. You lie there in your cramped little snow fort listening to the sky scream and wonder if you're better or worse off than those hunters were centuries ago. They had fewer options. Maybe, but they also had fewer doubts. The storm isn't breaking yet, but it's plateaued. That's something. It's stopped escalating. Now it's just holding, like a conversation that's gotten tense but not violent. You'll ride it out. You've made it through art worse. And when it finally passes, when the wind stops clawing and the snow goes soft again, you'll crawl out, brush off the frost, rebuild what collapsed, and start the process all over again. Because when the sky turns on you, you don't fight it. You endure it. The storm finally breaks near dusk, not with a bang, but with a sigh. You notice it first in the branches, the way they stop groaning, the way the wind no longer slaps them around like rag dolls. Then in the air itself. It's still cold, brutal, bitter, deep in your teeth cold, but the violence has gone, like something exhaled all its rage and has slumped down into a heavy, sulking silence. You wait a long time before moving. Even now, you don't trust it. The woods are too still. Your breath is too loud. You lie in your snow-caked shelter like a hunter who just heard the footsteps stop but never saw the thing walking away. There's a hum in the air, like tension left behind. But eventually your fingers start to ache again, and you know it's time to shift. You push back the edge of your cloak slowly and peek out. The forest has changed. Not in structure, but in mood. It looks the same, trees heavy with snow, the ground buried under thick white drifts. But there's a new smoothness to everything. No footprints, no broken branches, just untouched, unbroken snow in every direction. A blank slate. And if you didn't know better, you'd swear the storm was trying to erase you. You sit up fully and take stock. Your shelter survived, barely. One of the saplings has cracked under the weight of the snow and the cloak is sagging in the middle like a tired spine. But it held. You made it through another test. The fire pit is buried. Your supplies are dusted with powder. But you're still here. Now comes the hard part, rebuilding momentum. Surviving the cold is one thing. Re-entering the world after the cold, that's something else entirely. Your muscles ache with that deep, full-body soreness that comes from doing too little and too much at the same time. You stretch like an old man, slow, creaky, grumbling at joints that never used to complain. Your legs have fallen asleep. Your knees feel like they've been replaced with bricks. But you stand, slowly, and the world doesn't shatter. That's a win. You kick off the snow from your boots and pack and begin clearing the fire pit. Carefully. You don't want to lose the remaining coals if they're still alive beneath the ash. You scrape down to the bottom and find miracle, a faint glow. You grin, bare your teeth against the cold, and coax the flame back to life with dry moss and your last scrap of birch bark. It hisses, smokes, then flickers, then crackles. The fire returns, and just like that, your limbs remember how to be warm. As you move about your camp, re-establishing order, shaking snow off bedding, rebuilding your pine bough base, retightening your cloak frame, you remember something an old woodsman once told you. The cold don't care, but it notices. If you stop moving, it gets curious, and if it gets curious, you're done. He meant it figuratively, probably. You're not so sure anymore, because surviving out here is never just about the weather. It's about response, what you do next, what you do after the worst of it has passed. Some medieval texts refer to this phase, post-storm, post-freeze, as the reckoning. Not dramatic, just practical. It's the moment when you count what's left. Firewood, food, fingers. It's when you decide whether to move forward or hold your ground another night. You take inventory, not just of your supplies, but of yourself. And so you draw. Firewood. Enough for the night, maybe 2 if you ration. Food. Tight. You've got some dried meat, a bit of fat, a few sprigs of pine needle for tea. Fingers. All 10. No black tips, no frostbite bloom. Toes. Still responding, even if they feel like strangers. You're scraped up, sore, and soaked in layers of sweat and old smoke. But you're functional. Which is more than most could say after a storm like that. You refill your water skin with snow and set it near the fire to melt. Then you dig out your cooking pot, a small dented thing barely fit for soup, and start boiling a handful of pine needles. It's bitter, yes, but rich in what your body's desperate for now. Vitamin C, heat, and something not solid to put in your stomach. The steam curls up into your face, and for a moment, you just breathe it in, deep, slow, like you're sipping the forest's breath. It smells like winter and sap and stubbornness. You sit back and let your eyes roam the snow-covered camp. It's quiet now, peaceful even. The snow glows faintly in the late light, blue and grey and silver. The trees don't creak anymore. Nothing breathes but you. And yet, that stillness still unnerves you, because now you can hear your own thoughts again. No storm to block them out, no wind to drown them, just you, and that's always been the most dangerous part. You stir your tea, watching the needles swirl and think back to old stories. Hunters who, after surviving the worst winters, would go quiet. Not in speech, but in presence. You'd look at them and feel like they weren't all there, like a part of them was still stuck under the snow back in the cold, listening for the wind that never stopped screaming. Some say that was trauma, others say it was something older, a kind of spiritual frostbite, something that ate away at the soul one long night at a time. You don't know if that's true, but you know you're not immune. So you whisper to yourself, not a prayer, not exactly, just a reminder. You made it, again. You sip the tea, hot, sharp, just enough, and you decide you're not going anywhere tonight, not until the fire dies again. Not until your legs stop aching and your pack dries out, not until your brain stops thinking in storm rhythms and starts recognizing silence as something safe. Tonight, you rest. Not just because you're tired, but because tomorrow the cold might ask harder questions, and you'll need every answer you've got. You wake before the light comes, still wrapped in your cloak tent, your body sore in all the usual places and a few new ones. The fire's gone again, of course it is, and the air inside your little woolen dome is wet with the heavy breath of snowmelt and sleep. There's that particular smell too, Wool, smoke, pine sap, and the faint sourness of your own breath. It's the perfume of survival, and you've worn it long enough to recognize the subtle shifts. This morning it smells like something ending. You sit up slowly, grunting as you do, brushing melted frost from your collar. Something about the silence outside feels different today. Not tense, not threatening, just final. The storm has passed. The wind has stilled. And though you haven't seen the sun yet, there's a quality to the sky, a faint grey glow through the snow-laced wool above your head that tells you the day will come whether you're ready or not. And you are ready. Not comfortable, not safe, but ready. You peel back the side of the cloak and emerge into the dawn. The world is blinding. The snow reflects the first grey light in a way that makes you squint, even though the sun's still hidden behind a veil of cloud. Every surface is glazed in crystal. Tree limbs, the fire pit, your own pack. The forest has been iced into stillness. You could almost believe it's made of glass. You take a breath and it burns in your chest, cold and dry. You hold it anyway. This is the day you move, because the worst is behind you, and staying longer risks settling, letting the cold make a home in your joints, letting your muscles get too used to the stiffness, letting your mind get too comfortable with stillness. That's the real danger now, not dying, but forgetting how to live. You start your routine without thinking. Boots on, pack checked, knife at your belt. You eat while moving, 2 bites of jerky, a sip of water that tastes vaguely of smoke and pine resin. The fire pit gets buried. The cloak gets shaken off and rolled tight. You pack it all methodically, like a man who knows that hesitating can turn a morning into another night, and another night into another fight with frost. You're not interested in repeating yourself. The plan is simple. Move until you're warm. The ground is deep with snow, but not fresh. The storm left a thick crust on top, just enough to walk without sinking if you keep your steps light and even. Your legs are stiff at first, but the rhythm returns. One foot, then the other, arms swinging, breath rising like smoke. The forest shifts around you as you walk. You recognize the signs of post-storm life. Small things, a squirrel's tracks, fresh, weaving from one pine to another. A broken patch of snow where something bedded down for the night. The high-pitched chirp of a bird, tentative and soft, like it's testing the air. Life is returning. And you're part of it. The snow squeaks under your boots in that way it does when the cold has turned dry. That sound is oddly comforting. It means you're not in danger of melting into slush or falling through soft powder. It means the cold has stabilized. For now. You keep moving. The terrain rises. You crest a ridge and look out across a frozen valley, the trees below huddled close together like men warming their hands over a shared fire. In the distance you spot the faint line of a game trail, narrow, zigzagging between drifts. It's a good sign. Animals are moving again. That means the cold has passed its peak. And it means you might not have to chew leather tomorrow. There's a fringe theory that some medieval hunters followed invisible migration routes, not of animals, but of warmth. They believed warmth moved through the forest like a ghost, rising from one valley, crossing ridges, then settling in low places where the sun lingered. The trick was to follow it. Not the sun, the warmth itself. You smile at the idea. A little absurd, sure. But out here, in all this cold, absurdity can feel like guidance. So you keep following the warmth, step by step. You think back to your shelter, now buried under fresh snow. You left it behind without sentiment. That's another rule you've learned. Don't get attached. Not to a fire, not to a cloak, not even to a bed you built with your own blistered hands. Out here, permanence is a myth. Everything is temporary. Comfort is just a trick to make you stop moving. You don't fall for that anymore. Hours pass. You cover ground, you find dry bark and break it into kindling. You drink melted snow from a hollowed rock. You check your feet, no frostbite, just sweat. That too is a victory. You find a place near a boulder for a quick rest. You're back against the stone and watch the trees. And for the first time in days, you don't feel hunted, not by wolves, not by cold, not by your own thoughts. Just walking, just moving forward. You think about the people who lived this way long before you, hunters, poachers, scouts, monks on silent pilgrimages through snow. They didn't always leave written records, but you know they were here. You feel them in the way your cloak fits, in the way your boots flex across uneven snow, in the way your fire pit refused to die. Their knowledge is stitched into you now. You are their echo, and they are yours. Later you'll stop and build a fire. You'll use dry moss and shavings. You'll make tea with pine and chew your last bit of meat. You'll sleep in your cloak again, this time on fresh spruce with a better windbreak. And maybe, just maybe, you'll dream. But not of the cold. You'll dream of motion, of tracks in the snow, of breath that doesn't freeze before it leaves your lips. And when you wake, you'll keep moving, because that's the final lesson of surviving the medieval wilderness. Don't stop, not when the fire burns out, not when your fingers ache, not when the wind whispers. You keep walking, you keep breathing, you keep living. And now the storm is behind you. The fire's out, the shelter's gone, and your footprints, faint as they are, lead off into the white horizon, one step at a time. You've walked through the dark, through the freezing nights, through the kind of sadness that presses against the skull and makes you question where you end and the world begins. You've kept your fingers, your fire, your sanity. More importantly, you've kept your pattern, the rhythm of eat, sleep, wake, watch, repeat it. That's the core of surviving in the wild like a medieval hunter. Not some grand heroic sprint, just the stubborn, deliberate refusal to give in to the cold. The truth is, you were never really trying to be comfortable. You were just trying not to die, and against all odds and all temperatures, you didn't. You made bedding from tree branches, shelters from cloaks, warmth from snow, and meals out of scraps. You even made silence into company. That's no small thing. Somewhere far behind you, buried under fresh snow and windswept pine, there's the memory of a fire still glowing in the dirt. Let it stay there. Let it keep watch, because you're not sleeping on frost tonight. You're sleeping on knowledge. So now's the part where you lie back, close your eyes, and feel the weight lift from your shoulders. Your body's sore, but not broken. Your thoughts are quiet. The wind outside is just wind, not a threat, not a story, just air moving through trees. And if in the distance something still breathes in the dark, let it. You're warm now, you're home now, you made it through the freeze, and the forest knows your name.